In the shadow of monuments older than memory, questions rise that textbooks rarely dare to ask. Stone cut with impossible precision. Cities aligned to skies with mathematical intent. These are not myths, but facts that challenge our assumptions about the ancient world. Careful engineers working with knowledge we no longer recognize? As we move from sweeping landscapes to the marks left by human hands, the evidence grows unsettling. Tonight, we step beyond accepted timelines and examine structures and technologies that suggest a past far more advanced than we imagined. Let's take a closer look. On the granite high ground of West Cornwall, where the land rolls gently toward the Atlantic and the air carries a constant trace of salt and wind, the ruins of Euny Settlement sit quietly among the heather. At first glance, it appears unassuming. Low stone walls, circular foundations, and grassy hollows blending into the landscape. But beneath this calm surface lies a structure that has puzzled archaeologists, historians, and visitors for generations. The Fogou. Euny dates primarily to the late Iron Age, roughly between 100 BCE and 400 CE. The settlement once consisted of stone-built roundhouses arranged around courtyards, suggesting a small but organized community. Daily life here likely revolved around farming, livestock, and trade, with families sharing space and resources in a way typical of Iron Age Britain. The visible remains support this interpretation. Thick stone walls, carefully laid without mortar, designed to withstand centuries of weather. Yet it is what lies underground that draws the most attention. Cut into the earth beneath the settlement is a fogou, a narrow, stone-lined subterranean passage that twists into darkness. The walls are carefully constructed, corbelled inward to form a stable roof, and the temperature inside remains cool and constant year-round. The passage is not tall enough to stand comfortably, forcing visitors to crouch as they move deeper inside. Light fades quickly, and sound seems to soften, as though the earth itself absorbs it. From a practical standpoint, fogous are often explained as storage spaces, cool, hidden places for food during harsh winters or times of conflict. Others suggest they served as refuges, temporary hiding places during raids. These explanations are grounded in necessity and survival, and they fit well within what is known about Iron Age instability and resource management. Still, certain details complicate this picture. The fogou at Euny is more elaborate than simple storage would seem to require. Its construction demanded significant effort, planning, and skilled labor. The passage bends deliberately, obscuring the entrance from within. Some chambers widen slightly, almost as if designed for brief gathering rather than simple containment, and there is little direct evidence, no clear remnants of stored goods or domestic refuse, to confirm its everyday use. This absence has opened the door to quieter, more speculative interpretations. Some researchers have wondered whether fogous served a ritual or symbolic purpose. In many ancient cultures, underground spaces were associated with transition, with the boundary between worlds, between life and death, or between the human and the divine. Entering the earth, even briefly, could have carried spiritual meaning. The deliberate darkness, the narrowing space, the sensation of descent, were these intentional elements meant to provoke reflection, fear, or transformation? Local folklore adds another layer. Stories speak of strange sensations within fogous, disorientation, heightened awareness, or an unsettling sense of presence. While such experiences can often be explained by darkness, acoustics, and confined space, they have nonetheless contributed to the fogou's reputation as something more than functional architecture. There are also broader questions. Fogous appear almost exclusively in Cornwall and parts of Scotland, with no clear parallels elsewhere in Iron Age Europe. Why here? Why this form? And why did the tradition fade, leaving no written explanation behind? Standing at Carn Euny today, one is struck not by spectacle, but by restraint. Nothing here declares its purpose openly. The stones offer no inscriptions, no guidance, only form and silence. The Fogou remains as it was built, intact, deliberate, and unresolved. Perhaps it was storage, perhaps it was shelter, or perhaps it served a purpose that no longer fits neatly into modern categories. Whatever the truth, Carn Euny does not give it up easily, and as long as the Fogou remains beneath the earth, cool and quiet, the question lingers. What did its builders truly intend, and what knowledge might still be buried below our feet? From the quiet darkness beneath Carn Euny, where stone corridors disappeared into the earth and purpose remained elusive, our journey moves east, across continents, climates, and centuries, to another place shaped by stone, silence, and unanswered questions. Here, mystery does not hide underground. It rises instead, layered high above the plains of northwestern Iran, where the ruins of Hasanlu still overlook the landscape with quiet authority. The Hasanlu stone citadel stands atop a natural mound, or tepe, near the southern edge of Lake Urmia. From a distance, its remains appear almost fused with the hill itself, thick walls, fallen towers, and foundations worn smooth by time. The surrounding plain stretches outward in muted tones of dust and grass, framed by distant mountains that seem to watch over the site. Even now, the citadel dominates its environment, suggesting that visibility, control, and presence were central to its design. Archaeological evidence places Hasanlu's most prominent phase in the late 2nd millennium BCE. It was not an isolated outpost, but a fortified urban center, one of many that existed at the crossroads of powerful ancient cultures, including the Assyrians, Urartians, and other lesser-known kingdoms of the region. Excavations have revealed residential buildings, storage rooms, temples, and massive defensive walls constructed from stone and mud brick, reinforced with remarkable consistency. The citadel was clearly built with intention. Its elevated position provided strategic advantage, while its walls, some more than 3 meters thick, suggest preparation for sustained conflict. Within these walls, daily life unfolded. Grain was stored, metal was worked, rituals were performed. Hasanlu was not merely a fortress, it was a living city, and then, abruptly, it ended. Sometime around 800 BCE, Hasanlu was violently destroyed. Archaeologists uncovered clear signs of a sudden catastrophic attack. Burned buildings, collapsed roofs, weapons left behind. In some rooms, human remains were found exactly where they fell, preserved by ash and debris. These were not ceremonial burials. They were moments frozen in time, suggesting panic, resistance, and an overwhelming force that left no opportunity for recovery. The identity of the attackers remains debated. Some evidence points toward the Urartians, expanding aggressively across the region. Others suggest Assyrian involvement, or a conflict between local powers now lost to history. No written records from Hasanlu itself survive to confirm any account. The citadel fell, and its story went silent. Yet the mystery does not end with destruction. Among the ruins, archaeologists discovered objects that complicate the narrative, none more famous than the so-called Hasanlu gold bowl. Decorated with intricate mythological scenes, the bowl depicts figures, deities, and symbolic acts that do not align neatly with any single known tradition. Its imagery appears to blend influences from multiple cultures, suggesting a shared or contested symbolic language that scholars are still working to interpret. Why was such an object here? Was Hasanlu a cultural bridge between worlds, absorbing ideas as well as goods? Or does the bowl represent a belief system now entirely forgotten, practiced by people whose names never entered surviving texts? The Citadel's layout raises further questions. Certain structures appear over-engineered for their assumed purpose, while others suggest ritual significance without clear parallels elsewhere. Some buildings seem oriented with unusual precision, though whether this reflects astronomical, ceremonial, or purely practical considerations remains unclear. As with Carn Euny's Fogou, intent is difficult to prove, and absence of explanation invites speculation. More speculative theories linger at the edges of academic discussion. Some have wondered whether Hasanlu held a role beyond defense and trade, perhaps as a regional religious center, or a seat of authority tied to esoteric knowledge. Others point to the suddenness of its destruction and the valuables left behind, questioning why no effort was made to recover them. Was the site abandoned in haste? Or did something prevent survivors from returning? Standing atop the Citadel today, the view is expansive, almost serene. It is difficult to reconcile the calm with the violence that once unfolded here. Stone foundations remain, but the people, their language, their fears, their beliefs, are gone. What survives is architecture without explanation, artifacts without voices. Hasanlu does not offer a single mystery, but many overlapping ones. It was a city that thrived, fortified itself, and vanished in fire, leaving behind traces of complexity that resist simple interpretation. And as excavation continues, layer by layer, one question persists. How much of Hasanlu's story has already been uncovered, and how much still lies hidden beneath the earth, waiting to challenge what we think we know about the ancient world? From the burned stones of Hasanlu, where a fortified city fell in silence and fire, the trail of unanswered questions leads farther north, into a vastly different landscape, yet one shaped by the same human impulse to build, remember, and endure. Here, the ruins do not cling to a hilltop or hide beneath the ground. They stand exposed beneath an open sky, scattered across the windswept steppe of central Kazakhstan, where the horizon feels almost limitless, and time itself seems to slow. This is the land of the Begazy megalithic Mausolea. At first sight, the structures appear austere and solitary. Massive stone enclosures rise from the dry grasslands, formed from towering granite slabs arranged in careful geometric patterns. Some stand waist-high, others reach several meters, their weight and precision immediately apparent. There are no inscriptions to guide the visitor, no reliefs or carvings to soften their presence. The stones speak through scale alone, deliberate, commanding, and unmistakably purposeful. The Begazy Mausolea date to the Late Bronze Age, roughly between 1300 and 900 BCE, and are associated with what archaeologists call the Begazy Dandy-Bai culture. This society occupied the central Kazakh steppe during a period often characterized as nomadic and transient. Yet these monuments challenge that assumption. They required planning, coordination, and a deep familiarity with stone construction, qualities not typically attributed to mobile pastoral communities. Each mausoleum follows a similar but not identical design. An outer stone enclosure surrounds an inner chamber, sometimes built with upright megaliths supporting heavy capstones. Within these chambers, archaeologists have found burials, often singular, sometimes accompanied by ceramics, bronze tools, or ornaments. The remains suggest individuals of high status, possibly leaders, elders, or figures of symbolic importance within their communities. From a conventional archaeological perspective, these mausolea are elite tombs, expressions of social hierarchy and ancestor veneration. Their imposing size may have served to mark territory, assert lineage, or reinforce collective memory in an otherwise fluid landscape. In a world without cities or permanent architecture, such monuments would have stood as fixed points, anchors in space and time. And yet, the story grows more complex the longer one looks. The labor required to quarry, transport, and erect these stones is considerable, Some slabs weigh several tons, sourced from distant outcrops. How were they moved across open steppe without advanced tools or draft animals? What techniques were used to raise them into position with such precision? While experimental archaeology offers plausible methods, levers, rollers, coordinated labor, no direct evidence confirms exactly how the builders achieved these feats. The architectural choices themselves raise further questions. The inner chambers are often carefully proportioned, with stone walls that appear intentionally layered rather than crudely stacked. In some cases, the structures suggest an understanding of load distribution and long-term stability. This is not casual construction. It reflects accumulated knowledge, passed down and refined over generations. Then there is the question of symbolism. The mausolea are oriented deliberately within the landscape. While no universal alignment has been conclusively proven, some researchers have noted patterns that may correspond to cardinal directions, seasonal cycles, or prominent natural features. Were these orientations practical, ceremonial, or cosmological? Did the builders see these tombs not only as resting places for the dead, but as points of connection between earth, sky, and ancestry? In steppe cultures, the boundary between the living and the dead was often viewed as permeable rather than fixed. Ancestors were not gone. They remained present, influencing fortune, fertility, and survival. The Begazy mausolea, towering and enduring, may have served as places of communication as much as commemoration. More speculative interpretations drift quietly at the margins of scholarship. Some have suggested that the mausolea functioned as ritual centers rather than simple graves, sites revisited repeatedly for ceremonies long after the original burial. Others wonder whether the scale of the monuments exceeds what is necessary for funerary purposes alone. Were these structures meant to be seen from great distances, signaling authority across the steppe? Or did they encode meanings now lost, tied to beliefs that left no written trace? There is also the matter of cultural isolation. The Begazy mausolea have few direct parallels elsewhere in the Bronze Age world. While megalithic construction is known in many regions, the specific combination of enclosure, chamber, and monumental scale seen here is unusually localized. Why did this tradition emerge here, and why did it disappear? By the early Iron Age, the construction of such mausolea ceased. The steppe cultures that followed left behind different kinds of monuments, different expressions of identity and memory. The knowledge required to build these stone complexes seems to have faded, absorbed, or abandoned without explanation. Today, the mausolea stand open to the elements. Wind moves through broken grass. Shadows stretch across stone that has not shifted in thousands of years. There is no barrier between past and present, only distance in understanding. The builders left no words to explain themselves, only forms and patterns that resist simple interpretation. Like Hasanlu's fallen walls or Carn Euny's silent Fogou, the Begazy mausolea remind us that human history is not a straight line of progress, but a mosaic of innovations, beliefs, and experiments. Some fully understood, others only partially glimpsed. As we look out across the steppe, surrounded by monuments that have outlasted the cultures that raised them, one question remains unresolved. Were these stones built merely to honor the dead, or to communicate something enduring, something we have yet to fully recognize? From the open silence of the Kazakh steppe, where stone mausolea stood beneath an endless sky, the trail of unanswered questions turns west once more, toward a colder landscape shaped by wind, mist, and rising ground. Here, mystery does not announce itself with towering slabs or open horizons. It gathers instead at the summit of a hill, wrapped in cloud and distance, overlooking the rolling terrain of northeast Scotland. Tapo Noth rises sharply from the Aberdeenshire countryside, its slopes steep and exposed, its summit often veiled by drifting fog. From below, it appears as a natural prominence, one hill among many. But as the ascent continues, traces of human intervention begin to emerge, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Lines of stone, curving forms that resist the randomness of geology. At the top, encircling the summit, lies the fragmented outline of an ancient hill fort, one of the most enigmatic in Britain. For generations, Taponoth was understood as a typical Iron Age fortification, a defensible position, ringed by walls, offering refuge in times of danger. Like many hill forts scattered across the British Isles, it was thought to have been modest in scale, occupied intermittently by small communities who relied on elevation rather than permanence for protection. That understanding has begun to shift. Recent archaeological investigations have revealed that beneath the collapsed surface stones lies a massive, carefully constructed stone core, far larger and more complex than previously assumed. This core suggests that the ramparts of Taponoth were not simple dry stone walls, but monumental structures built with extraordinary investment of labor and material. In places, the walls may once have stood several meters high, reinforced and reshaped over time. The scale of construction raises immediate questions. Why build something so substantial at such height, in such an exposed environment? And who had the capacity to organize the workforce required to create it? Dating evidence places the main phase of activity somewhere between the late Iron Age and the early medieval period, potentially overlapping with the era traditionally associated with the Picts, a people known largely through fragmentary sources, carved stones, and Roman accounts written by outsiders. Taponoth, it seems, may not have been a temporary refuge at all, but a densely occupied stronghold. Excavations around the summit have uncovered traces of numerous hut platforms, far more than expected. If these were indeed dwellings, the hilltop may once have supported hundreds, possibly even thousands, of inhabitants. Such a population density challenges long-held assumptions about settlement patterns in early Scotland, especially in upland regions previously thought to be sparsely inhabited. Mainstream interpretations suggest Taponoth functioned as a major power center, perhaps seasonal, perhaps permanent, where communities gathered for protection, trade, or political authority. The fort's commanding views would have allowed control over surrounding routes, while its imposing walls would have projected strength and cohesion. Yet the stone core complicates even this explanation. The engineering involved implies a sophisticated understanding of construction and long-term stability. Some researchers have compared the fort's structure to vitrified hill forts found elsewhere in Scotland, where intense heat fused stones together, possibly through deliberate firing, though whether this was intentional or accidental remains debated. While vitrification at Taponoth is limited, the possibility introduces another layer of uncertainty. Was fire used as a construction technique, a destructive force, or something more symbolic? Then there is the question of duration. Evidence suggests the site was occupied and modified over an extended period. Walls were rebuilt. Structures were adapted. This was not a single event frozen in time, but a place that evolved alongside the society that maintained it. And yet, no written records describe it. No name survives. Its purpose must be inferred entirely from what remains. More speculative ideas linger quietly at the edges of interpretation. Some have wondered whether Taponoth served not only as a fortress, but as a ceremonial or administrative center, a place where authority was enacted as much as defended. Others point to the effort required to live at such altitude, exposed to harsh weather, and ask why anyone would choose permanence here unless compelled by something beyond mere strategy. Was the hilltop chosen for its visibility alone, or for meanings now lost? Did it hold symbolic power, tied to identity, ancestry, or belief? In many ancient cultures, high places were associated with connection to the sky, to gods, or to other realms. While there is no direct evidence for ritual activity at Taponoth, absence of proof is not proof of absence. especially in a landscape where organic materials rarely survive. Eventually, the site was abandoned. The reasons are unclear. Climate, conflict, shifting power structures, all are possible. Stones collapsed inward. Timber decayed. What was once a commanding presence slowly blended back into the hill itself. Today, standing at the summit, the view is vast and quiet. Wind moves across broken walls. Clouds pass quickly, casting shadows that reshape the land below. It is difficult to imagine the noise of life that may once have filled this space, the voices, the movement, the constant awareness of exposure and defense. Like the Mausolea of Begazy, the Citadel of Hasanlu, and the Fogou at Carn Euny, Tap o' Noth offers no final answers. It presents evidence, not explanations. Stone, not testimony. And as research continues to peel back layers of earth and assumption, one question remains open, carried on the wind at the hill's peak. Was Tap o' Noth simply a fort built for survival, or the surface trace of a society whose complexity we are only beginning to understand? From the mist-laden summit of Tap o' Noth, where stone walls crown a Scottish hill and questions linger in the wind, the journey continues west, across the sea, into a softer but no less ancient landscape. Here, the ground rises and falls in slow, deliberate curves. Mountains recede into cloud. Grass moves in quiet waves beneath an ever-changing sky. In the remote valleys of County Kerry, far from modern roads and cities, another circle of stone waits in near silence. Staigue Stone Fort stands alone in the uplands, its presence both commanding and restrained. From a distance, it appears almost organic, as though it grew from the land itself. Massive limestone blocks are stacked without mortar, forming a near-perfect circular wall that encloses an empty interior. The stones are weathered but tightly fitted, their surfaces softened by centuries of wind and rain. Even now, the wall rises over 5 meters high in places, thick, solid, and unmistakably intentional. This is Staigue, one of Ireland's most impressive dry stone forts, often dated to the late Iron Age or early centuries CE. Yet its exact origins remain uncertain. No written records mention its construction. No clear artifacts survive to anchor it firmly within a single moment in time. What we see is structure without context, architecture divorced from explanation. From a conventional archaeological perspective, Staigue is interpreted as a cashel, a stone fort likely built by a local elite, perhaps a chieftain or powerful family. Its location, overlooking fertile land and natural routes through the valley, would have offered both symbolic authority and practical oversight. The thickness of its walls, up to 4 meters at the base, suggests defense, while internal stairways and terraces indicate careful planning and skilled craftsmanship. Yet Staigue is different from many other ring forts scattered across Ireland. There is no evidence of domestic buildings within its interior, no hearths, no clear traces of long-term habitation. The space inside the walls is oddly open, almost austere. If this was a home, it was an unusually empty one. If it was a fortress, it seems curiously lacking in the signs of everyday life one would expect. The fort's construction raises further questions. The stones used are large and heavy, quarried locally but shaped and placed with precision. The walls curve inward slightly as they rise, a technique that adds strength and stability, a form of engineering knowledge refined through experience. Narrow staircases are built directly into the thickness of the wall, leading to elevated platforms that may once have supported wooden structures or walkways. Why invest so much effort here in such a remote setting? Some scholars suggest Staigue may represent an early phase of stone fort construction in Ireland, a transitional form, marking the shift from timber defenses to more permanent architecture. Others propose that its scale and isolation indicate a purpose beyond simple residence or refuge. Perhaps it was a regional stronghold, used intermittently rather than continuously. Or perhaps it served a function we no longer recognize. The surrounding landscape adds to the ambiguity. Staigue is not hidden. It is visible from afar, its pale stone contrasting with dark hills and green valleys. This visibility feels deliberate, almost declarative. Was the fort meant to be seen, to signal power, ownership, or lineage? Or did its builders choose this place for reasons less tangible? In Irish tradition, circular forms carry deep symbolic weight. They are associated with cycles, protection, and continuity. While there is no direct evidence linking Staigue to ritual practice, some have wondered whether its form and emptiness hint at a ceremonial role. Could this have been a gathering place, used seasonally or for events tied to social or spiritual life? A space defined not by what it contained, but by what occurred within it. More speculative ideas drift at the edges of interpretation. The fort's precision, its endurance, and its apparent overbuilding have led some to question whether our assumptions about Iron Age Ireland underestimate the organizational abilities of its societies. Did the builders possess techniques or knowledge that later generations abandoned? Was Staigue part of a broader architectural tradition now mostly lost, preserved here only because of its isolation? There is also the question of time. Some researchers have suggested that Staigue's earliest phase may predate conventional Iron Age dating, possibly reaching back into the Late Bronze Age. This remains unproven, but the lack of definitive dating evidence leaves the door open. Stone does not reveal its age easily, and in places like Staigue, silence becomes part of the puzzle. Unlike Tap O'Noth, there is no sign of violent destruction here. No burned layers, no collapsed roofs. The fort seems simply to have fallen out of use. Its walls remained standing, its interior emptied. The reasons are unknown. Changing power structures, shifting settlement patterns, or cultural transformation may all have played a role. Today, standing inside Staigue, sound behaves differently. Wind echoes softly against stone. Footsteps feel amplified, then quickly absorbed. The walls enclose not just space, but attention. It is easy to imagine the fort filled with people, or deliberately kept empty, reserved for moments that mattered. Like the hill forts of Scotland, the Mausolea of the Kazakh steppe, and the buried passages of Cornwall, Staigue resists certainty. It offers strength without explanation, presence without narrative. Each stone is a statement, but the message remains incomplete. And so the question lingers, as it has for centuries. Was Staigue Stone Fort built simply to defend and display power? Or does its early phase preserve the outline of a purpose we no longer have the language to describe? From the stone circle of Staigue, where walls enclosed silence as much as space, the journey continues eastward across the Irish Sea. The landscape shifts subtly. Mountains soften, valleys narrow, and the air grows heavy with moisture carried in from the coast. In North Wales, near the Isle of Anglesey, the land becomes dense with hedgerows and ancient fields. It is here, partially hidden among trees and low hills, that another settlement endures, less monumental in appearance, yet no less perplexing. Din Lligwy lies quietly inland from the modern shoreline, its remains scattered across a gently sloping rise. At first glance, the site appears fragmented. Low stone walls, collapsed structures, and outlines barely rising above the grass. But as the eye adjusts, order begins to emerge. Circular house foundations cluster together, their thick walls forming enclosed cells of stone. Pathways weave between them. This was not a single dwelling, but a community, compact, deliberate, and enduring. Archaeologists date Din Lligwy primarily to the Romano-British period, roughly between the 1st and 4th centuries CE. The settlement appears to have been occupied over several generations, surviving through a time of profound transition as Roman influence reached Britain's western edges. Excavations have uncovered evidence of round houses built with unusually thick stone walls, some exceeding a meter in width, suggesting a concern for durability, insulation, or defense. From a conventional standpoint, Lligwy is understood as a farming settlement. The inhabitants likely raised livestock, cultivated crops, and engaged in local trade. Roman artifacts found at the site, pottery fragments, coins, and imported goods, indicate contact with wider networks, even if Roman control here was indirect. Life at Lligwy, according to this view, was resilient rather than extravagant, a community adapting to change while maintaining older traditions. Yet the physical remains complicate this narrative. The houses at Lligwy are unusually substantial for domestic structures. Their walls are not only thick, but carefully constructed, with stone facing on both sides and rubble infill between, a technique that requires planning and labor beyond immediate necessity. Some structures show signs of rebuilding and modification, suggesting long-term investment rather than temporary occupation. Even more puzzling is the density of the settlement. The roundhouses are packed closely together, leaving limited open space. This compactness is atypical of rural farming communities, which usually spread out to accommodate animals and storage. Why build so tightly here? Was space constrained by social factors rather than geography? Or does the layout reflect a different use of communal and private areas than we assume? Nearby, traces of other features deepen the mystery. A large courtyard-like enclosure sits adjacent to the settlement, its purpose uncertain. Some interpret it as a livestock pen, others as a communal working area. Its scale, however, exceeds what would be necessary for a small household economy. Was Lligwy more than a simple village? Adding to the intrigue is the site's apparent longevity. While many settlements of this period were abandoned or transformed as Roman authority waned, Lligwy appears to have persisted. Its buildings were repaired, not replaced. Its layout remained consistent. This continuity suggests a strong attachment to place, perhaps rooted in lineage, identity, or tradition. Local folklore hints at deeper layers. The name Lligwy itself implies fortification, though no obvious defensive walls surround the settlement. Legends speak of ancient inhabitants, of gatherings and presences felt in the area long after it was abandoned. Such stories are difficult to separate from imagination, yet they often arise around places that retain a sense of significance beyond their visible remains. Some researchers have wondered whether Lligwy served a dual purpose. Could it have functioned as both a domestic settlement and a specialized center, perhaps for craft production, seasonal assembly, or ritual activity? The absence of clear industrial debris argues against large-scale manufacturing, but the architecture suggests something more intentional than subsistence living alone. More speculative ideas remain at the margins. The thick-walled houses, the tight clustering, and the site's endurance have led some to question whether Lligwy reflects a social structure that prioritized cohesion and protection over expansion. Was this a community responding to instability, political, cultural, or environmental? Or does it represent a cultural choice, preserving an older way of life even as the surrounding world changed? There is also the matter of what is missing. Despite extensive excavation, certain expected elements are absent or scarce. Clear burial sites linked directly to the settlement are difficult to identify. Written records are non-existent. We know the people lived here, but not how they understood themselves, their place in the world, or what ultimately led them to leave. When Lligwy was finally abandoned, there is no evidence of violence or sudden collapse. The houses simply fell quiet. Roofs decayed. Walls settled. The land reclaimed the space gradually, without drama. Whatever compelled the inhabitants to move on did not leave a mark in ash or broken stone. Today, walking among the remains, the site feels intimate rather than imposing. The low walls create pockets of stillness. Sound is muted. The settlement seems to draw attention inward, encouraging close observation rather than distant awe. It is easy to imagine daily life unfolding here, conversations carried between stone walls, shared labor, routines shaped by season and weather. Like Staigue's empty interior, Taponoth's towering core, and the enduring monuments of the steppe, Din Lligwy resists a single explanation. It exists between categories, Roman and native, permanent and adaptive, ordinary and exceptional. And as the stones continue to weather in place, another question quietly remains. Was Din Lligwy simply a resilient village shaped by its time, or does its careful construction preserve the outline of a social or cultural purpose that history has yet to fully uncover? From the quiet hills of Anglesey, where Din Lligwy's tightly packed stone houses whisper of a community that endured in the margins of Roman influence, our journey now arcs southeast, across seas, mountains, and centuries, to a land where history presses densely against the present. Central Anatolia rises from the heart of modern Turkey, a region where plains meet jagged hills, and where the echoes of the Bronze Age still resonate in stone. Here lies Alacahöyük, a site that has fascinated archaeologists and historians for over a century, where the foundations of a monumental gate hint at a civilization both advanced and enigmatic. Approaching Alacahöyük today, the first impression is one of scale and symmetry. The ruins are laid across a gentle mound, yet the hill itself seems subordinate to what human hands have shaped upon it. At the heart of the site lie the foundations of a massive stone gateway, a threshold that once defined the boundary between inner city and outer world. Even in ruin, its presence is imposing. Thick stone blocks, carefully cut and fitted, rise from the earth with a precision that suggests both purpose and permanence. The stones, some weighing several tons, are arranged in a deliberate sequence, forming what would have been a formidable entryway, wide enough to accommodate large processions or the movement of animals and goods. The layout is more than architectural. It is ceremonial, symbolic, almost declarative in the way it organizes space and controls sightlines. Excavations at Alacahöyük reveal that the site's occupation stretches back to the early Bronze Age, around 2500 BCE, with continuous layers of activity over several centuries. It became a center of the Hittite civilization, a hub of trade, governance, and religious practice. The gate foundations belong to an era of significant urban development, when fortified settlements were not only protective, but also expressive of societal hierarchy and cultural sophistication. Archaeologists interpret the massive gateway as part of a complex that included temples, administrative buildings, and burial mounds, a nexus of spiritual and political authority. Yet, despite extensive study, the stone gate remains enigmatic. Its construction demonstrates engineering skill that challenges conventional assumptions about Bronze Age Anatolia. The blocks are unusually uniform and carefully aligned, requiring precise measurement, coordination, and knowledge of load distribution. Some stones are fitted so tightly that even a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. How did Bronze Age builders achieve this level of precision without metal tools comparable to later periods? Was there a lost technique, perhaps now irrecoverable, that allowed them to manipulate stone on such a scale? The gate's design also suggests a deeper meaning beyond utility. Its width, height, and orientation indicate a deliberate control of movement and perspective, almost theatrical in effect. One can imagine visitors, dignitaries, or worshippers passing beneath the arch, their attention guided by both form and symmetry. Did the builders intend to impress, intimidate, or inspire awe? Or did the structure serve a function we have yet to identify, connected to ritual, cosmology, or a world view now lost to time? Nearby, archaeologists uncovered evidence of elaborate burial practices, royal tombs, richly adorned with gold, jewelry, and ceremonial objects, lie not far from the gate foundations. Some artifacts, like finely crafted scepters, small figurines, and intricately carved animal motifs, suggest a symbolic vocabulary about power, the afterlife, and the natural world. Yet the connection between these tombs and the gate is not fully understood. Was the gateway a threshold between life and death, between the mundane and the sacred, or simply a statement of civic authority? The mystery deepens with questions of chronology and construction technique. The layering of stonework indicates multiple phases of rebuilding and reinforcement. Some sections appear older than others, suggesting that the gate was not a single project, but a continuously maintained feature. Why invest in such labor-intensive repairs over generations? Was it purely functional, or did the act of rebuilding carry ritual significance, perhaps reinforcing dynastic continuity or spiritual legitimacy? Alacahöyük's position in the Anatolian landscape adds another layer of intrigue. The site overlooks fertile plains and river valleys, making it ideal for settlement and trade. Yet the scale and sophistication of the structures far exceed what would be necessary for simple habitation or defense. Some scholars speculate that Alacahöyük served as a ceremonial or administrative center on a regional scale, a place where distant communities would converge to engage in ritual, commerce, or governance. If so, the stone gate might have symbolized the threshold not merely of a city, but of a society's worldview, a physical manifestation of hierarchy, cosmology, and order. Even so, the purpose of certain design choices remains unresolved. Some stones are unusually large, others shaped with forms that do not appear elsewhere in the region. Certain alignments suggest possible astronomical observation, though no definitive evidence links the gate to solar or lunar cycles. Was it functional, symbolic, or a combination of both? Did it mark seasonal or ceremonial events? Or are we projecting our modern desire for pattern onto a structure whose meaning was understood intuitively by its creators? Speculative interpretations, while tantalizing, must be approached cautiously. Could the gate represent a vestige of knowledge or technology that has since been lost? A means of controlling movement, of encoding information, or of expressing social power in ways we no longer fully grasp? Could it have had a dual role, both practical and symbolic, that bridged the everyday and the divine? We may never know with certainty. Today, walking along the surviving foundations of the gate, one can sense the magnitude of effort required to build it. Each stone is a silent witness to the labor, skill, and intent of the people who conceived it. The structure endures, though the civilization that raised it has vanished. Dust settles on the same blocks that guided ceremonial processions thousands of years ago. The surrounding landscape has shifted, yet the gate still asserts its presence, demanding attention and curiosity. Like Lligwy, Staigue, Tap-o-Noth, and the distant monuments of Alacahöyük's contemporaries across Eurasia, this stone foundation resists simple categorization. It is at once practical and enigmatic, monumental and intimate. Its message is partially obscured by time, yet its impact is immediate, speaking to an intelligence and vision that survives across millennia. And as the wind moves through the partially reconstructed stones, the question remains: was the Alacahöyük stone gate built merely to mark an entrance, a threshold of power or defense? Or does it preserve within its carefully placed blocks a deeper, more profound purpose that we have yet to understand? Could it be that hidden knowledge, once embedded in form and construction, still lingers here, waiting for someone to perceive its full meaning? From the monumental stone foundations of Alacahöyük, where gates once defined thresholds of power and ceremony, our journey moves south and east, beyond the Anatolian plateau into the arid expanses of the Arabian Peninsula. Here, the landscape opens into a vast desert, where sand and stone stretch to the horizon, and the sky is an unbroken dome of light by day and stars by night. Among these sands, near the town of Ha'il in northern Saudi Arabia, rises a formation that is at once subtle and striking. The Rajajil standing stones, an array of monoliths whose presence has quietly challenged the assumptions of archaeologists and travelers alike for generations. At first glance, the site appears deceptively simple. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of upright stones arranged across a broad plateau. From a distance, the stones are mere vertical markers, gray and weathered, some leaning or toppled, their surfaces smoothed by wind and time. As one approaches, however, the scale and deliberation of the arrangement become apparent. The stones, varying in height from 1 to 3 meters, are organized in patterns that suggest intention. Some alignments form circles, others rows, yet there is no uniform spacing. Certain stones are clustered, while others stand solitary. The effect is both orderly and chaotic, as if the builders were encoding information in ways we do not yet comprehend. Archaeological investigation dates the site to somewhere between 2000 and 1500 BCE, placing it within the Bronze Age. Little is known about the communities that erected these stones. The desert offers few clues. Organic materials decay rapidly, and no written records survive from the people who constructed Rajajil. Pottery fragments and nearby settlement traces suggest semi-nomadic societies, possibly pastoralist in nature, who traversed these arid plains seasonally. Yet the scale of effort required to move and erect such large stones implies organization, labor, and purpose that exceeds what might be expected from small mobile groups. Mainstream interpretations focus on the possibility of ceremonial or funerary functions. Some stones appear to mark burial sites, though few graves have been definitively linked to the monoliths. Others have suggested astronomical significance, alignments that may have tracked the movements of the sun, moon, or stars, perhaps serving as calendars or markers of seasonal cycles. Yet these interpretations are speculative, constrained by the absence of corroborating evidence. The stones themselves do not carry inscriptions, carvings, or other immediately interpretable signs. Even within these broad theories, the Rajajil standing stones present anomalies. Certain rows are unusually straight and evenly spaced over distances of tens of meters, requiring precise measurement and planning. Some of the monoliths are deliberately shaped, with one side smoothed or angled, suggesting an understanding of form and orientation. Transporting and erecting these stones would have demanded coordination, skill, and perhaps mechanical knowledge. Techniques that leave no record and challenge modern assumptions about the capabilities of Bronze Age peoples in this region. Speculation extends further when one considers the site's broader context. Rajajil is not isolated. Similar stone circles and alignments exist across northern Arabia, yet Rajajil stands out for its density and apparent complexity. Why select this plateau? Was it the visibility from afar, the suitability of local stone, or something more esoteric, perhaps spiritual or symbolic? Did the site serve as a regional gathering place, a locus of ritual, or a marker of territorial claims? Or were the stones arranged to embody a worldview, encoding cosmology, ancestry, or social hierarchy in silent stone? One particularly intriguing feature is the apparent variation in orientation among different rows. Some align north-south, others east-west, and some follow no obvious cardinal direction at all. Are these differences practical, tied to terrain or wind, or intentional, reflecting astronomical, ceremonial, or calendrical purposes? Could they represent overlapping phases of construction, each layer created by successive generations, each encoding knowledge or belief systems now lost? The patterns evoke questions about memory and transmission. How much knowledge did the builders pass from one generation to the next, and how much was intentionally embedded in the stones themselves? Local tradition, though fragmentary, adds a layer of narrative intrigue. Stories passed down speak of giants, spirits, and gatherings that took place around the stones, hinting at the continuing cultural significance of the site. While these accounts cannot be verified archaeologically, they reveal that Rajajil has long inspired human imagination, suggesting that its meaning, whatever it was, remains potent, even when its original context has been lost. Some researchers have proposed more speculative explanations. Could Rajajil have been a center of astronomical observation, its stones forming a rudimentary observatory that mapped solar, lunar, or stellar events? Others suggest the site may have encoded ritual sequences, guiding communal activities or seasonal ceremonies. A few have even posited connections to trade routes, implying that the stones served as territorial markers or waypoints across a harsh and unforgiving landscape. None of these theories can be confirmed definitively, yet each underscores the depth of thought and labor required to erect the site in the first place. Walking among the stones today, the experience is immediate and tactile. The desert wind brushes against the monoliths, their surfaces rough beneath the hand. Footsteps echo faintly across the hard, flat ground. The silence is profound, broken only by natural sounds and the occasional call of distant birds. One cannot help but sense the passage of countless seasons, the rise and fall of communities, the persistence of intention encoded in cold, unyielding stone. Rajajil endures, as it has for millennia, silently asserting its presence and inviting reflection. Like the monumental gate foundations of Alacahöyük, the densely packed houses of Lligwy, the circular enclosures of Staigue, and the stone cores of Taponoth, the Rajajil standing stones resist simple categorization. They are architectural without being conventional, monumental without imposing themselves, deliberate without explanation. They are both practical and symbolic, serving purposes that remain just beyond our comprehension. And as the sun moves across the desert sky, casting shifting shadows among the monoliths, one question lingers in the mind. Were the Rajajil standing stones constructed merely as markers, ceremonial, funerary, or territorial, or do they preserve within their silent arrangement a knowledge, a ritual, or a world view that we have yet to decipher? Could it be that the desert itself has conspired to protect not just the stones, but the mysteries they were meant to hold, leaving us to wonder at what truths remain hidden, buried in plain sight among these enduring monoliths? From the sun-scorched deserts of northern Arabia, where the Rajajil standing stones rise silently against the horizon, we now turn eastward, crossing vast expanses of terrain, rivers, and plains, to the fertile lands of the Indian subcontinent. Here, in the modern state of Haryana, lies Rakhigarhi, one of the most extensive and enigmatic sites of the Indus Valley civilization. Unlike the linear rows and circles of Rajajil, Rakhigarhi presents a more intricate urban landscape, yet among its sprawling mounds and excavated neighborhoods, there are features that continue to baffle scholars. The so-called stone platforms, carefully constructed, deliberate, and strangely elevated above the surrounding settlement. At first glance, these stone platforms appear deceptively simple. Flat, rectangular surfaces, often raised on a foundation of large, dressed stones. But a closer inspection reveals their complexity. Each platform is constructed with precision. The stones are aligned carefully, some fitted together with minimal gaps, and the surfaces leveled in a manner that suggests both purpose and permanence. They range in size, some large enough to support communal activities, others smaller and seemingly functional for more private or specialized use. The platforms are often positioned in clusters, integrated into the broader urban plan, yet they seem to occupy a space that is neither entirely domestic nor wholly utilitarian. Excavations at Rakhigarhi date the settlement to roughly 2600 to 1900 BCE, placing it firmly within the mature phase of the Indus Valley civilization. This was a society remarkable for its planning, engineering, and administrative capabilities. Streets are laid out in a grid, drainage systems are sophisticated, and buildings are carefully constructed from fired and mud bricks. Yet even amid this well-documented urban order, the stone platforms defy easy categorization. Were they stages for communal rituals, elevated surfaces for trade, or perhaps foundations for structures now lost to time? Archaeologists have proposed several explanations. Some interpret the platforms as bases for large granaries or storage buildings, an essential component of a civilization known for agricultural sophistication. Others suggest they might have supported workshops or served as elevated surfaces for crafting, keeping valuable tools or materials above the dust and water that frequently accumulate during the monsoon season. While these functional interpretations are plausible, the sheer care with which the platforms were constructed suggests something more than mere utility. Their scale, placement, and alignment often hint at intentionality that might extend into symbolic or ceremonial dimensions. Further intrigue comes from the materials themselves. The stones used in the platforms are heavy, often quarried locally, but selected for uniformity and durability. Transporting and placing them would have required organized labor and planning, implying the platforms were significant within the social or administrative structure of Rakhigarhi. Some platforms show evidence of repairs and modifications over time, suggesting long-term investment and continued use across generations. What motivated this persistent attention? Were these structures central to the community's daily life, or did they serve as stages for events that transcended ordinary existence? Their arrangement within the urban landscape is equally compelling. Platforms often sit near intersections of streets or close to larger buildings whose purpose remains speculative. This positioning might indicate a civic or communal function, perhaps spaces where the population gathered for markets, ceremonies, or governance. Yet there is no clear evidence of permanent superstructures above the platforms. No post holes, no masonry remains to indicate roofs. Could the elevated surfaces themselves have been sufficient for their intended purpose, or did they support now vanished wooden structures, lost to the centuries? Some researchers have even proposed that the platforms were linked to the spiritual or ritual life of Rakhigarhi. The Indus Valley civilization is known for its enigmatic seals, figurines, and possible ritual baths. Could the stone platforms have been spaces where ceremonies were performed, offerings placed, or communal activities observed? Their elevation would have given them prominence within the settlement, allowing certain activities to be visible from multiple directions. Yet, in the absence of clear iconography or inscriptions, such interpretations remain tantalizing but unconfirmed. The mystery deepens when we consider the broader region. Rakhigarhi is one of several major Indus Valley sites, including Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Dholavira, yet similar stone platforms are relatively rare, suggesting that their function may have been specific to this settlement or to a particular social or administrative class within it. Were these platforms markers of authority, designed to structure social space and behavior? Were they utilitarian, ceremonial, or perhaps a combination of both? Adding another layer of enigma is the lack of direct evidence linking the platforms to written records. The Indus script remains undeciphered, so any assumptions about their purpose must rely on context and inference. We can examine their size, shape, and placement, and compare them to other Indus Valley features, but the intent of the builders remains elusive. What meaning, what knowledge, was encoded in these stones? Even more puzzling is the absence of comparable features in neighboring settlements of similar size. If the platforms were essential for everyday life, storage, crafting, or ritual, why are they so concentrated at Rakhigarhi? Was there a local innovation, a tradition that flourished uniquely here? Or did they serve a symbolic role, intended to distinguish this city as a center of power, ceremony, or spiritual significance within the broader Indus network. Walking among the platforms today, one senses both the precision and the mystery of their construction. The sun casts long shadows across the flat surfaces, highlighting the meticulous leveling and alignment of the stones. The desert wind occasionally lifts dust, whispering through gaps between blocks, as though carrying faint echoes of long-forgotten activity. The silence is profound, punctuated only by the soft crunch of footsteps on ancient soil. It is easy to imagine the spaces alive with motion, craftsmen at work, merchants trading, or rituals observed, but the absence of direct evidence leaves all such visions speculative. Like the Rajajil standing stones, Alacahöyük's monumental gates, and Din Lligwy's clustered houses, the Rakhigarhi stone platforms speak to a combination of intention, skill, and mystery. They are tangible remnants of human ingenuity, yet they resist simple explanation. They are functional, yet enigmatic, communal, yet intimate, ordinary in form, but extraordinary in implication. And so, as we trace our hands over the weathered stone and survey the subtle grids of the surrounding settlement, one question persists. Were the Rakhigarhi stone platforms built solely for practical purposes, elevated surfaces to support daily life and commerce? Or do they preserve within their careful construction a layer of knowledge, ritual, or social significance that we have yet to understand? Could it be that the builders of Rakhigarhi, like their contemporaries across distant lands, encoded meanings in stone that endure silently, waiting for us to perceive what was once obvious to those who first laid these foundations? From the meticulously constructed stone platforms of Rakhigarhi, where elevated surfaces hint at rituals, trade, and social organization that remain just beyond our grasp, we now travel northwest, across the breadth of Eurasia, to the misted hills of Ireland. Here, in the verdant landscapes of County Wicklow, lies Rathgall, a stone fort whose presence commands attention even in ruin. Unlike the rectilinear platforms of India, Rathgall is circular, imposing, and layered, a site where stone, earth, and human intention converge in ways both tangible and mysterious. Approaching Rathgall today, the first impression is one of scale and geometry. From a distance, the site appears as a series of concentric rings, the outermost ramparts rising from grassy slopes like the outline of some colossal ancient mandala. The walls, constructed from rough-hewn stones stacked with remarkable precision, enclose an area that spans several hectares. Within these concentric boundaries lie terraces, elevated platforms, and subtle divisions, suggesting that the interior was carefully planned, not simply enclosed. Even in decay, the fort conveys a sense of purpose, of structure imposed upon the landscape, as though every stone was placed with deliberate intent. Archaeologists date Rathgall primarily to the Bronze Age, around 1500 to 1000 BCE, though earlier and later phases of occupation cannot be ruled out. The site sits atop a hill that affords panoramic views of the surrounding valleys, providing both natural defense and strategic oversight. This combination of location, construction, and scale implies that Rathgall was more than a mere dwelling. It was a fortified settlement, a center of influence, and possibly a ceremonial hub. Yet, despite centuries of study, its precise function remains elusive. The concentric walls themselves are a marvel of Bronze Age engineering. Some sections rise to over 2 meters, constructed from interlocking stones without the use of mortar. The precision suggests knowledge of load distribution and long-term durability, and the layout implies not just fortification, but control of movement. Entrances are limited, narrow, and carefully positioned, forcing anyone entering to follow a defined path. Were these measures purely defensive, designed to protect inhabitants from external threats? Or did they serve a more symbolic purpose, guiding movement and focus within a space imbued with ritual significance? Inside the fort, terraces and leveled areas suggest multiple uses, yet no single interpretation fully accounts for their arrangement. Certain areas appear designed for habitation, with traces of hearths and storage pits, while others seem ceremonial or administrative, elevated above the surrounding floors as if to observe or command. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments of pottery, tools, and decorative objects, but nothing that decisively explains the site's social or spiritual function. Did these concentric rings represent layers of authority, stages of ritual, or perhaps cosmological symbolism embedded in stone? The discovery of human remains in and around Rathgall adds another layer of complexity. Skeletal fragments and cremated remains suggest burial practices were integrated with the living space, though the patterns differ from typical Bronze Age cemeteries. Could this indicate a site where life and death coexisted in ritual harmony? Or were these individuals commemorated within the fort to reinforce dynastic authority or social cohesion? The absence of inscriptions or written records leaves these questions tantalizingly open. Some researchers have speculated that Rathgall's construction may encode astronomical knowledge. The positioning of walls, entrances, and elevated terraces aligns in part with solar events such as solstices. If true, the fort may have functioned as a calendar or observatory, a place where celestial cycles were integrated into social, agricultural, or ceremonial life. Yet these alignments are subtle, easily missed, and their significance cannot be proven definitively. Was this intentional knowledge preserved in stone and landscape, or a coincidental pattern that modern eyes seek to interpret? The labor involved in constructing Rathgall cannot be overstated. Moving, shaping, and stacking large stones over multiple concentric layers would have required organization, skill, and sustained effort. The precision of construction hints at advanced communal planning and coordination. Why devote such energy to a site that is difficult to defend comprehensively, situated on exposed slopes, and distant from major trade routes? Was the fort intended primarily as a statement? A projection of power, belief, or social cohesion visible across the valleys? Beyond practical and defensive considerations, the fort's layout invites contemplation of symbolic meaning. The concentric rings may have delineated sacred versus profane space, areas for leaders versus commoners, or zones for ritual versus domestic activity. Such distinctions, however, are speculative. What survives in stone is measurable and visible, but the beliefs, intentions, and social structures encoded in these walls remain inaccessible, glimpsed only through inference and imagination. Rathgall also fits within a broader pattern of circular forts, known in Ireland as raths or cashels, yet it is distinguished by its scale, the number of concentric walls, and the apparent deliberation of its design. Could this reflect a unique cultural or political importance? Was Rathgall a regional center, a gathering place for communities across the Wicklow Hills, or even a site of supra-local significance, tied to trade, ritual, or governance on a wider scale? Its prominence and complexity suggest it was more than a simple homestead or defensive enclosure, yet its precise role remains unresolved. Walking the terraces and examining the layered walls today, one senses the interplay of effort, design, and mystery. The wind sweeps across the grassy slopes, whispering through gaps in the stones, carrying with it echoes of Bronze Age footsteps, gatherings, and perhaps ceremonies long forgotten. The fort's concentric rings draw the eye inward and upward, suggesting both control and contemplation. It is a place where human intention meets landscape, where stone embodies knowledge now inaccessible, yet still perceptible in the subtle order of construction. Like the Rakhigarhi platforms, the Rajajil standing stones, and Alacahöyük's monumental gates, Rathgall occupies a space between the functional and the enigmatic. It is a site of skill, labor, and foresight, yet one whose meaning remains tantalizingly out of reach. The fort endures not only as a structure of defense or habitation, but as a silent repository of human thought, encoded in patterns of stone and earth that have persisted for millennia. And as the sun moves across the Wicklow Hills, casting shifting shadows through the concentric walls, one question lingers. Was Rathgall built merely as a fortified settlement, a pragmatic response to the challenges of Bronze Age life, or does it preserve within its layered stonework a deeper, more profound knowledge, ritual, or societal organization that remains hidden, waiting for those who can decipher the intentions etched into these enduring rings of stone? Could it be that the mystery of Rathgall, like so many other ancient structures across the world, is not a problem to be solved, but a dialogue to be entered, one in which we must learn to see with the eyes of those who first laid these stones? From the layered fortifications of Rathgall, where concentric walls trace the intentions of Bronze Age planners in Ireland's misted hills, our journey moves southward, across the Mediterranean, to the rocky promontories of Sardinia. Here, overlooking the turquoise waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea, sits Monte Sirai, a stone settlement perched precariously upon a limestone ridge. At first glance, the site appears as a jumble of walls and terraces, a rugged silhouette against the sky. Yet beneath this apparent disorder lies a civilization's careful orchestration of space, architecture, and community, an arrangement that has intrigued archaeologists and historians for generations. Monte Sirai is a settlement of contrasts. From above, the stone structures seem to grow organically from the rocky slopes, yet closer inspection reveals a meticulous design. The settlement occupies a ridge that dominates the surrounding plain, offering expansive views of the coastline and the interior valleys. Its walls curve around natural contours, terraces create level spaces on uneven terrain, and narrow passages wind between buildings, as if to guide movement in subtle ways. The stones themselves, rough yet carefully positioned, form houses, enclosures, and defensive structures, many of which show signs of repeated modification and repair over centuries of occupation. Archaeologists date Monte Sirai to the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age, roughly between the 10th and 6th centuries BCE. The settlement was later influenced by Phoenician and Carthaginian cultures, introducing new layers of material culture, architecture, and trade. Yet the core of Monte Sirai predates these interactions, hinting at a complex indigenous society capable of urban planning, resource management, and construction on challenging terrain. The very placement of the settlement, on a ridge with difficult access, suggests strategic foresight, both for defense and for control over trade routes connecting Sardinia's interior to its coast. Despite its apparent function as a fortified settlement, Monte Sirai possesses features that resist simple interpretation. Some terraces and platforms are unusually large and flat, prompting speculation that they served communal or ceremonial purposes. Certain stone enclosures appear symbolic rather than utilitarian, and some walls, while defensive in appearance, may also have marked social or ritual boundaries within the community. The settlement's architecture combines pragmatism with sophistication. Walls are carefully aligned, corners reinforced, and terraces supported by dry stone retaining walls that have withstood centuries of erosion. What guided these choices? Were they purely practical, or did they reflect an underlying social or spiritual order, now lost to time? One of the most fascinating aspects of Monte Sirai is its integration with the natural landscape. The builders exploited every ridge, slope, and natural contour to create a settlement that is simultaneously hidden and commanding. The pathways between houses and terraces twist and turn, sometimes opening onto expansive views, sometimes constraining movement as if to control the experience of space. This interplay of concealment and revelation invites speculation. Were these design choices defensive, ritualistic, or symbolic? Could the arrangement of buildings, terraces, and walls encode knowledge about the seasons, celestial events, or social hierarchy? Artifacts recovered from Monte Sirai provide further insight and raise further questions. Pottery fragments, metal tools, and imported goods attest to trade and craftsmanship, while religious iconography hints at spiritual practices influenced by broader Mediterranean cultures. Yet many elements remain mysterious. Some structures contain niches or features that are difficult to classify. Are they storage areas, ritual spaces, or markers of authority? Certain terraces appear intentionally raised above surrounding buildings, offering visibility over communal areas. Were these stages for gatherings, ceremonies, or observation points for astronomical events? The evidence is fragmentary, leaving room for interpretation but few definitive answers. Monte Sirai also challenges assumptions about ancient social organization. The scale of construction and the apparent planning required to integrate houses, terraces, and defensive walls into rugged terrain imply coordination and leadership. How were these communities organized? Was there a ruling class, a council of elders, or a priesthood directing construction, trade, and ritual? Could some of the more unusual features, like unusually large terraces or isolated enclosures, have been reserved for select individuals or groups? Without written records, these questions remain tantalizingly open, answered only partially by the surviving architecture and material culture. The settlement's strategic location raises additional enigmas. Monte Sirai overlooks not just the coast, but also routes connecting inland settlements, suggesting that its builders were aware of trade, migration, and political influence across the region. Was the site primarily defensive, a sentinel watching over valuable resources and pathways? Or was its positioning symbolic, projecting power, prestige, or spiritual significance across the surrounding landscape? The stone walls themselves, while practical, might also have been statements of permanence and authority, communicating something to observers from afar. Even more mysterious are the settlement's terraces and platforms, which seem to transcend purely functional explanations. Some are unusually wide and level for domestic use, while others are isolated or elevated in ways that suggest deliberate staging or hierarchy. Could these spaces have hosted public gatherings, religious ceremonies, or marketplaces? Were they stages for ritual performance, centers of community negotiation, or observatories for celestial events? Each hypothesis is plausible, yet the absence of definitive evidence leaves Monte Sirai in the category of sites that provoke wonder without resolution. Walking the settlement today, the experience is immediate and tactile. Stones, weathered and sun-bleached, still form walls and terraces that hug the uneven ridge. The wind carries the scent of the sea, brushing past corners, pathways, and the remains of dwellings. Shadows shift across terraces, emphasizing their elevation and the deliberate organization of space. Standing here, it is easy to imagine a community moving through these structures: traders, craftsmen, families, and priests. Yet the precise rhythm of life remains invisible, lost to the centuries. Like Rathgall in Ireland, Rakhigarhi in India, and Monte Sirai's distant cousins across Europe and the Mediterranean, the site blends the practical with the enigmatic. It is a settlement of human ingenuity, labor, and organization, yet it preserves in its stones questions that remain unanswered. Why here, on this ridge? Why these shapes, these terraces, these walls? And what knowledge or meaning, social or spiritual, is encoded in the architecture that we cannot yet fully perceive? As the sun moves across the Sardinian sky, casting shadows that trace the contours of terraces, walls, and ridges, one is left with the profound sense that Monte Sirai is more than an archaeological site. It is a dialogue across millennia, a place where the ingenuity, intention, and perhaps ritual of its builders endure silently, challenging us to interpret, understand, and wonder. And so, the question persists. Were the terraces, walls, and platforms of Monte Sirai purely functional? Or did they carry layers of social, ceremonial, or cosmological significance that remain hidden, waiting for future discovery to reveal even a fraction of the mysteries preserved in stone upon this windswept ridge? From the sun-drenched terraces and ridge-top fortifications of Monte Sirai, where stone and landscape merge in deliberate complexity, our journey returns to the mist-laden hills of the British Isles. Northern Ireland, a land of rugged coastlines and ancient rhythms, holds its own enigmas, silent witnesses of human presence across millennia. Among these, the Goward Dolmen chamber rises subtly from a rolling hill, unassuming at first, yet impossible to ignore once the eye catches the weight and geometry of its stones. Unlike the sprawling settlements of Sardinia or the monumental stone platforms of Rakhigarhi, Goward is compact, intimate, and intensely mysterious, a chamber tomb whose very presence evokes questions that have lingered for thousands of years. Approaching Goward, the first impression is one of deliberate permanence. Massive capstones rest upon upright megaliths, forming a chamber whose interior has sheltered countless winters and endured relentless weather. Moss and lichen cling to the stone surfaces, softening the visual harshness of the megaliths but amplifying the impression of age. The chamber is oriented with apparent care, though the reasoning behind its placement remains unclear. It sits on a gentle rise, overlooking farmland and distant hills, yet the surrounding terrain does not demand defense or strategic oversight. Its purpose, then, may have been symbolic, spiritual, or ceremonial rather than practical, but the specifics elude us. Archaeologists date Goward Dolmen to the Neolithic period, around 4000 to 3000 BCE, a time when communities across Europe were transitioning from simple agrarian settlements to organized societies capable of large-scale construction and ritual practice. Dolmens like Goward were often used for burial, yet their function appears to extend beyond mere interment. Excavations across similar sites in Northern Ireland reveal cremated remains, pottery, and occasional tools, but the evidence is fragmentary. What motivated these early builders to raise such heavy stones into enduring forms? Were they markers of lineage, spiritual gateways, or memorials to the dead? The construction itself is a feat that continues to inspire wonder. Each upright megalith supports enormous capstones, some weighing several tons, carefully balanced to create a chamber that has withstood millennia. Moving and lifting such stones without metal tools or wheeled vehicles would have required ingenuity, coordination, and communal effort. Was the act of construction itself part of a ritual, binding communities together through labor, intent, and shared belief? Or was it purely functional, designed to protect the dead from scavengers and the elements? The chamber's orientation adds another layer of intrigue. Many Northern Irish dolmens are aligned with solar events, such as the rising or setting sun during solstices or equinoxes. Goward's axis appears to catch light in a particular way at dawn during the spring equinox, illuminating portions of the chamber interior. Is this alignment intentional, evidence of early astronomical observation, or mere coincidence? If intentional, what does this say about the cosmological understanding of the people who built it? Did the dolmen serve as a marker for agricultural cycles, a spiritual portal, or a place where the living connected with ancestral forces? Even within the compact chamber, subtle details suggest layers of meaning. The stones themselves are not uniform. Some show wear, scratches, or subtle shaping that may have been symbolic or practical. Certain capstones are slightly tilted, creating angles that catch sunlight or channel rainwater in ways that might have been noticed and interpreted by its builders. Could these features have been designed to produce sound or shadow effects during ceremonies? Were these dolmens intended to interact with the natural elements as part of a ritual experience, blending human architecture with the landscape? The surrounding environment also holds clues and questions. Unlike larger settlements or fortified complexes, Goward sits in relative isolation. There is no immediate evidence of associated domestic structures, defensive works, or marketplaces. This isolation may suggest that the site was specifically reserved for ritual or ceremonial use, accessible only at certain times, or for specific individuals or groups. Was this a community shrine, a burial site for elites, or part of a network of dolmens marking territorial or spiritual boundaries? Some researchers speculate that dolmens like Goward were designed to bridge worlds, the living and the dead, the earthly and the cosmic. The stone chambers may have functioned as liminal spaces where the veil between the material and spiritual was thin. Could the placement of stones, their mass, and the orientation of the chamber have been intended to evoke a sense of awe, reverence, or even fear? What experiences did those who entered the chamber millennia ago undergo, and how much of that intent is perceptible to us now? Artifacts recovered from similar dolmens, ceramics, flint tools, personal ornaments, suggest ritualized deposition. Objects were placed within the chambers, sometimes deliberately broken or arranged. This indicates an interaction with death and memory that was more complex than simple burial. Was Goward a stage for ceremonial acts, a place where community identity and belief were reaffirmed? Or were these deposits symbolic gestures, echoing practices now incomprehensible to the modern observer? Walking around the dolmen today, one is struck by its scale and presence. Even though modest compared to monumental sites like Rathgall or Monte Sirai, the chamber exerts a quiet authority. The capstones, weathered and monumental, seem to resist time itself, while the upright stones stand as silent witnesses to centuries of human passage. The wind moves through gaps, carrying the sound of leaves and distant streams, producing a sense of movement and continuity that connects the present with the distant past. Goward dolmen, like Rakhigarhi's platforms, Monte Sirai's terraces, and Rathgall's concentric walls, exists at the intersection of human intention, technical skill, and mystery. It is at once functional, ceremonial, and enigmatic, preserving layers of meaning that are now partially obscured. Its endurance challenges us to consider not only the physical construction, but also the social, spiritual, and intellectual capacities of the communities that built it. And so, as sunlight shifts across the chamber and shadows stretch along the weathered stones, one is left with a profound question. Was Goward dolmen constructed merely as a burial space, a protective chamber for the dead, or was it something more? A place where human experience, cosmology, and ritual intersected in ways we can only begin to imagine. What knowledge, belief, or intention was encoded in its carefully raised stones, and what might still be hidden, preserved in silence, waiting for future generations to discover? Could it be that the dolmen, like so many other ancient structures across the globe, continues to speak, not in words, but in presence and proportion, inviting us to wonder at the ingenuity, devotion, and mystery of its creators? From the quiet, moss-covered stones of Northern Ireland's Goward dolmen, where the weight of time presses silently against each upright monolith, our journey shifts eastward to the vast, wind-swept steppes of Central Asia. Here, in the rolling plains of southern Kazakhstan, lies the Akyrtas stone complex, a site both imposing and enigmatic, where enormous natural and shaped rock formations rise from the earth like a city frozen in stone. Unlike dolmens or fortifications designed for habitation, Akyrtas seems to occupy a space between natural landscape and human intention, a liminal site that invites both study and speculation. Approaching Akyrtas, one is immediately struck by scale and form. Towering limestone pillars, some reaching several meters in height, emerge from a plateau carved by wind and rain. Deep fissures, carved channels, and flat terraces suggest deliberate modification, hinting at human intervention layered upon natural formations. The stone surfaces bear grooves and depressions that are too regular to be entirely natural, yet too enigmatic to be confidently explained. At first glance, it is difficult to separate what nature shaped from what human hands may have altered, but therein lies part of the site's intrigue. Archaeologists have noted traces of human activity at Akyrtas dating to the Bronze Age, roughly between 2000 and 1000 BCE, though definitive dating remains difficult due to limited material evidence. Pottery shards, scattered tools, and remnants of fire pits suggest the site was visited, if not permanently inhabited. Yet the sheer scale of the stone formations, combined with the apparent precision of carved terraces, channels, and flat surfaces, raises the question: did the builders intend Akyrtas for practical purposes, ceremonial use, or something else entirely? The arrangement of the stones is striking. Many are aligned along subtle axes, forming long, straight rows or circular clusters that interact with the landscape in a way that feels deliberate. Some researchers have suggested astronomical alignments, noting that certain formations correspond loosely to solstitial or lunar events. Could Akyrtas have been a calendar, a place where celestial phenomena were observed and marked in stone? Or were these alignments coincidental, a product of the builder's adaptation to the terrain, rather than intentional cosmology? The carved features of the complex add further layers of mystery. Some stones display depressions and grooves that may have held wooden posts, ritual objects, or water, while flat terraces could have functioned as platforms for gatherings or ceremonies. Others show signs of shaping that imply advanced knowledge of stoneworking and structural balance. How much effort would have been required to modify these massive formations, and what social or spiritual motivation could justify such labor? Could the site have served as a ritual center for a regional culture, or as a boundary marker for groups navigating the vast steppes? Despite the practical possibilities, Akyrtas also evokes more enigmatic interpretations. The combination of size, precision, and isolation has led some to propose that the site was a place of spiritual or ritual significance, rather than purely utilitarian. Did ancient peoples view these stones as intermediaries between earth and sky, as silent witnesses to gatherings, ceremonies, or offerings? The absence of inscriptions or definitive iconography leaves these interpretations open-ended, yet the enduring presence of the stones suggests that their purpose was deeply important to those who shaped them. Adding to the complexity is the surrounding landscape. The plateau is elevated, offering clear sight lines across the steppes, yet it is exposed to wind, rain, and temperature extremes. Such placement may have been strategic, providing a vantage point for observation or signaling. Alternatively, it may have held symbolic significance, placing human activity within a dramatic natural amphitheater. The very isolation of Akyrtas amplifies its mystery. Why invest in a site that is difficult to access, exposed to the elements, and seemingly disconnected from permanent settlements? Some features at Akyrtas hint at possible water management or symbolic use of liquids. Channels carved into stone appear to direct flow, while depressions could have collected rainwater. Were these functional adaptations for survival, agricultural experimentation, or perhaps ceremonial practices involving water? In other ancient cultures, water features were often integrated into ritual spaces, representing purification, fertility, or cosmic order. Could Akyrtas have served a similar function, linking the terrestrial to the sacred? The labor required to construct, carve, and organize the stones cannot be overstated. Moving even small boulders across the plateau, shaping terraces, and aligning formations implies coordination, planning, and technical knowledge. Was this the work of a cohesive community, perhaps operating under a central authority, Or did it evolve gradually, with successive generations adding and modifying features? The absence of permanent domestic structures complicates this question, suggesting that Akyrtas may have been visited seasonally or ritually rather than continuously inhabited. Akyrtas also occupies a broader context of megalithic and ceremonial landscapes in Central Asia. Similar sites, though often smaller, appear throughout the Kazakh steppes, indicating a pattern of monumental stone use in the region. Yet Akyrtas stands out for its scale, complexity, and apparent interaction with both terrain and sky. Did it serve as a regional ceremonial hub, a boundary marker, or a place of knowledge, observation, and ritual whose significance has been lost to history? Walking among the stones today, one is struck by the interplay of natural form and human intervention. The wind whistles through fissures, sunlight casts sharp shadows across terraces, and the flat surfaces seem to invite the gaze upward toward the sky. It is a space that encourages reflection, curiosity, and awe. Even without definitive evidence, the sense of intention embedded in the site is palpable. Akyrtas is not random. It is a statement, a deliberate interaction between human activity, landscape, and perhaps the cosmos. Like Goward Dolmen, Rathgall Stone Fort, and Monte Sirai, Akyrtas embodies the tension between the practical and the mysterious. Its stones are real, solid, measurable. Its purpose, largely hidden. What survives is a testament to human ingenuity, labor, and perhaps belief, yet the meaning of these efforts is obscured by time. The complex stands as a silent dialogue across millennia, inviting observers to consider the intelligence, dedication, and vision of those who shaped it. And so, as the steps stretch toward the horizon and shadows shift across the carved terraces, one is left with a profound question. Was Akyrtas constructed as a ceremonial center, an astronomical observatory, a boundary marker, or something entirely beyond our understanding? What knowledge, belief, or ritual practice was encoded into these monumental stones, and what remains hidden in plain sight, awaiting discovery? Could Akyrtas, like so many ancient structures across the world, be speaking to us still, not in words, but through its presence, its geometry, and its enduring mystery, calling us to wonder at the intentions of those who first shaped this extraordinary landscape? From the windswept steppes of Kazakhstan, where the Akyrtas stone complex rises in silent grandeur, our journey returns westward across continents, arriving in the rolling hills of Derbyshire, England. Here lies Arbor Low, a henge of enigmatic proportions, a circular arrangement of massive limestone megaliths set upon a gentle plateau, a place where human intention and the natural world intersect in ways that continue to puzzle archaeologists, historians, and visitors alike. Unlike the towering stones of Akyrtas, Arbor Low is grounded in the earth, yet its scale, symmetry, and design convey a deliberate effort to shape both landscape and experience, inviting reflection across millennia. Approaching Arbor Low, one is struck first by the sheer simplicity of its design and the subtle power of its presence. The site comprises a nearly perfect circle of unworked limestone blocks, most of them partially buried or lying fallen over centuries, surrounded by a low earthen bank and a shallow ditch forming the henge itself. The stones, though irregular in shape, were clearly placed with intention, each forming part of a geometry that both contains and defines the space within. The henge lies open to the sky, allowing sunlight and shadow to trace shifting patterns across the circle, offering a sense of time and motion within its otherwise still presence. Archaeologists date Arbor Low to the late Neolithic period, roughly 2500 to 2000 BCE, placing it among the most significant ceremonial landscapes of prehistoric Britain. Its construction represents not only technical skill, but also social organization, as moving and arranging stones of such size would have required coordinated effort, planning, and perhaps central leadership. Yet, unlike later stone circles, Arbor Low lacks significant markings or carvings, leaving its meaning largely opaque. What compelled its builders to erect this ring of stones, and what activities took place within its boundaries? Excavations and surveys have revealed clues, though they often deepen rather than resolve the mystery. The Henge's earthen bank and ditch, forming a defined perimeter, suggest a space set apart from the surrounding landscape, a place of ceremony, ritual, or observation. Within the circle, smaller stone settings and evidence of timber posts point to possible structures that have since decayed or vanished. Some archaeologists propose that Arbor Low functioned as a communal gathering space where Neolithic communities conducted ceremonies marking seasonal events, births, deaths, or transitions. Others suggest it may have served as a burial site, a ceremonial stage, or even an astronomical observatory, though concrete evidence is elusive. The site's orientation and the placement of individual stones raise further questions. Certain stones align with the midwinter sunset and the midsummer sunrise, hinting at an awareness of solar patterns and cycles. Could Arbor Low have served as a calendar, guiding agricultural or ceremonial cycles? Or were these alignments coincidental, a byproduct of the terrain rather than an intentional astronomical design? If deliberate, what knowledge of the sky, of celestial motion, or of timekeeping did the builders possess, and how was it encoded into stone? Arbor Low is also remarkable for the contrast between its monumental scale and the apparent restraint of its architecture. The stones are large but not massive compared to other Neolithic sites, suggesting a conscious balance between effort, visual impact, and accessibility. The surrounding earthworks are similarly modest, forming an elegant frame rather than an imposing barrier. Was this simplicity intentional, emphasizing the sacredness of the space over its defensive or functional qualities? Did the henge create a liminal zone, a transitional space between everyday life and ritual, between the human and the divine? And artifacts recovered from Arbor Low offer tantalizing hints but few answers. Flint tools, pottery fragments, and traces of human activity suggest intermittent use, yet there is little evidence of permanent habitation. This implies that the site was visited for specific purposes, perhaps seasonally, by communities who invested significant labor for relatively short periods. What drove these repeated efforts? Was it a shared spiritual practice, a demonstration of social cohesion, or something that modern interpretation cannot fully capture? Some researchers have proposed that Arbor Low may have had acoustic or sensory dimensions, shaped to enhance the experience of ritual participants. The circle of stones, though low, could amplify voices or create echoes, while the openness of the site allows wind, light, and sound to interact with the space in subtle ways. Could these factors have been recognized and deliberately integrated into ceremonies, creating a multisensory environment that reinforced communal belief or awe? The answers remain speculative, yet the very possibility adds to the site's allure. Arbor Low also exists within a broader landscape rich with prehistoric monuments. Burial mounds, barrows, and other henges dot the surrounding countryside, forming a network of ritual spaces. The relationship between these sites is unclear, though it suggests a sophisticated understanding of territory, movement, and social connectivity. Was Arbor Low a central node in this network, a place of convergence for dispersed communities, or one of many ritual arenas, each with its own specialized function? The surrounding terrain, with its gentle hills and fertile valleys, would have facilitated access, yet the site's prominence on the plateau emphasizes visibility and perhaps symbolic dominance over the landscape. The human experience of Arbor Low is palpable even today. Standing within the circle, one senses the careful alignment, the rhythm of the stones, and the quiet authority of the space. Sunlight plays across weathered limestone, casting long shadows that trace invisible lines between stones. The wind whispers through gaps and fissures, carrying the scent of grass, earth, and distant woodlands. It is a place where the imagination bridges past and present, where the intentions of builders and observers separated by thousands of years can still resonate. Like Akyrtas, Goward, and Monte Sirai, Arbor embodies the tension between practical construction and enigmatic purpose. Its stones are measurable, its layout intentional, yet its true function, its meaning, and the experiences it hosted remain largely hidden. The henge invites us to consider not only the physical labor and skill required to erect it, but also the social, spiritual, and intellectual capacities of the people who shaped it. As sunlight shifts across the plateau, highlighting each limestone block and tracing the arc of the henge, one is left with a persistent question. Was Arbor designed solely for communal gatherings, ceremonial performance, or astronomical observation, or did it serve a more profound, perhaps symbolic function now lost to time? What knowledge, belief, or intention was embedded in its geometry, and what remains invisible, encoded in the interplay of stone, earth, and sky? Could it be that Arbor, like so many ancient structures across the globe, continues to speak, not in words, but through presence, proportion, and mystery, inviting us to wonder, to reflect, and to imagine the lives and beliefs of those who first shaped this enduring circle of stone? From the quiet, open expanse of Derbyshire, where the henge of Arbor whispers the memory of Neolithic gatherings, our journey returns to the misted hills and valleys of Northern Ireland. Here, among low ridges and fields carved by centuries of farming, stands the Glenroan portal tomb, a monument of stone both enduring and enigmatic, a relic of a distant past that continues to raise questions about human intention, belief, and architectural skill. Unlike the broad openness of Arbor, Glenroan is intimate yet imposing, a structure whose very presence commands reflection, inviting one to step closer, to measure, to wonder. Glenroan is immediately striking for its simplicity and its precision. Two massive upright stones, almost cathedral-like in their verticality, support a third enormous capstone that forms a roof, creating a chamber beneath. The stones themselves are rough-hewn but carefully selected, each positioned with care to maintain balance and structural stability. The monument rests on a gentle slope, its stones partially embedded in the earth, suggesting both permanence and a deliberate interaction with the landscape. The portal faces eastward, though the reason for this orientation remains a topic of speculation, hinting perhaps at symbolic or astronomical significance. Dating the tomb proves challenging, yet archaeologists place it within the late Neolithic period, roughly 3,500 to 3000 BCE, contemporary with other portal tombs across Ireland. These monuments, sometimes called dolmens, were among the earliest monumental constructions in the region, marking a transition from temporary settlements to lasting structures that memorialized the dead, the sacred, or the social order itself. Yet unlike a modern cemetery, Glenroan and its counterparts are striking in their abstraction. Simple arrangements of massive stones that provoke awe without explanation. Excavations and surveys at similar portal tombs suggest they were burial sites, often containing cremated remains or grave goods, sometimes modest, sometimes elaborate. At Glenroan, traces of human activity hint at ritualized funerary practices, though evidence is sparse and fragmentary. The chamber, though small, could have held the remains of a few individuals, or perhaps many over generations. Was it a family tomb, a communal memorial, or a monument to an individual of special significance? The lack of inscriptions or markings leaves these questions unresolved. Yet the effort required to erect the structure speaks to the importance of its purpose. The engineering of Glenroan is remarkable. The capstone, enormous in scale, balances atop its supports with a precision that would have required knowledge of leverage, weight distribution, and placement. How did Neolithic builders, with no metal tools or advanced machinery, maneuver such stones into position? Did they use wooden levers, earthen ramps, ropes, or ingenuity now lost to history? The monument embodies both physical labor and conceptual vision. A plan conceived long before the first stone was moved, executed with meticulous care. Orientation and placement deepen the mystery. The tomb faces roughly east, toward the rising sun. In many cultures, eastward orientation is associated with rebirth, renewal, or the journey of the soul. Could this have been the intention at Glenroan? Was the tomb aligned to mark solstices, equinoxes, or seasonal transitions, linking the dead with cycles of nature and time? Or was the choice of orientation practical, symbolic, or coincidental, guided by terrain, convenience, or ancestral tradition? The portal itself, the narrow passage formed by the upright stones, creates a threshold, a liminal space between the outside world and the interior chamber. Passing through it, one experiences both enclosure and elevation. The weight of the capstone above, the narrow walls pressing slightly inward, the subtle light filtering around the edges. Was this intentional, designed to evoke reverence, awe, or contemplation? Did the builders imagine the chamber as a space of transformation, where the living could encounter the presence of the dead or engage in ritual acts that bridged the temporal and the eternal? Some researchers have suggested that portal tombs like Glenroan also functioned as territorial markers, signifying ancestral claims to the land or social cohesion within a region. The monument's visibility across the surrounding fields and hills would have reinforced a sense of continuity and identity, connecting contemporary inhabitants with those who labored generations before. Yet Glenroan is modest in scale compared to other megalithic sites, emphasizing subtlety and intimacy rather than grandeur, raising questions about the social and spiritual dynamics that dictated its construction. The tomb's isolation also provokes reflection. Unlike henges or settlements, which often integrate with surrounding communities, Glenroan stands alone, its chamber framed by pasture and distant ridges. The solitude amplifies its presence. Wind whistles across the stones, grass grows between the supports, and sunlight shifts throughout the day, casting long shadows that trace the monument's geometry. This isolation may have been deliberate, heightening the sacred or ceremonial quality of the site, or it may simply reflect preservation of a location once integrated into a broader network now lost. Even small details invite speculation. Weathering patterns suggest the stones have shifted subtly over millennia, yet their arrangement remains remarkably stable. Lichen and moss cover portions of the capstone, softening its edges, while the upright supports maintain a solemn verticality. Could the builders have anticipated the endurance of these stones, choosing materials and placement to ensure survival over thousands of years? Was permanence a statement in itself, a reflection of beliefs about ancestry, memory, or the natural order? Glenroan also poses questions about human interaction with space and scale. The chamber is intimate, yet the stones themselves are monumental. This tension between the individual and the collective, between human scale and geological scale, may have been central to the tomb's impact. Was the effect intended to inspire humility, reverence, or reflection? Did participants experience the site as a bridge between earthly existence and the sacred, a place where the weight of stone mirrored the weight of memory, lineage, or spiritual significance? Like Arbor, Monte Sirai, and Akyrtas, Glenroan embodies the intersection of the practical and the mysterious. It is measurable, tangible, and enduring, yet its purpose, experience, and meaning remain largely hidden. The stones themselves are testimony to human effort, vision, and intention, but they do not speak in words. Instead, they offer presence, proportion, and a silent narrative that invites contemplation, curiosity, and awe. Standing today before the portal, one can imagine the Neolithic builders lifting and aligning each stone, the careful planning and labor that created this enduring chamber. The sunrise paints the capstone with fleeting light. Wind whispers through the surrounding fields. It is a moment of connection across millennia, a reminder of the intelligence, devotion, and mystery of those who first shaped this monument. And as shadows stretch across the chamber and the stones settle further into the earth, a question remains. Was Glenroan Portal Tomb simply a burial site, a territorial marker, or a ceremonial space? Or did it serve a purpose far beyond what we can reconstruct? A ritual, a spiritual bridge, or a symbol of human understanding encoded in stone? What stories, beliefs, or knowledge were embedded here, now silent, waiting for observers to sense their presence across the ages? Could this modest yet powerful tomb, like so many ancient structures scattered across the world, still hold secrets that invite us to look, to ponder, and to wonder at the lives and intentions of those who built it? From the quiet, solemn presence of the Glenroan Portal Tomb, where stone and earth converge to create a chamber both intimate and enduring, our journey continues across the rolling landscapes of Ireland, arriving at one of the most enigmatic prehistoric sites in the region, Mooghaun Hillfort. Perched high above the River Fergus Valley in County Clare, the Hillfort stretches across a ridge with sweeping vistas of fields, woodlands, and distant hills. Here, stone and earth combine on a monumental scale, creating ramparts and enclosures that speak of ambition, organization, and an understanding of landscape that continues to intrigue archaeologists and visitors alike. Mooghaun is immediately striking for its sheer size and complexity. Unlike modest enclosures or single-purpose structures, this hill fort occupies an area of roughly 27 hectares, making it one of the largest known hill forts in Ireland. Its stone ramparts, layered and formidable, rise in undulating arcs along the contours of the ridge, creating multiple enclosures within a single defensive system. The walls themselves are constructed from carefully stacked limestone, some sections rising more than 4 meters high with widths sufficient to allow the movement of people, or perhaps even livestock, along their tops. The scale alone suggests a society capable of coordinated labor, long-term planning, and a sense of permanence rarely seen in other contemporary structures. Archaeologists date the primary construction of Mooghaun Hillfort to the Late Bronze Age, around 950 to 900 BCE, although evidence indicates that some parts may have been used or modified for centuries afterward. Its builders created a fortified space capable of protecting both people and resources, yet the sheer magnitude of labor required raises questions about intent and necessity. Why devote so much effort to fortifications in a landscape that offers natural defenses? Was the hill fort primarily a military installation, a refuge, a symbol of wealth and power, or something more symbolic, perhaps marking the territory of a complex social or ritual network? The ramparts themselves are remarkable in their design and execution. Stone courses are carefully leveled, and the walls follow the natural contours of the ridge, blending construction with topography in a sophisticated manner. In some areas, ditches and counterscarps complement the stonework, enhancing both defensive capabilities and visual impact. Yet, despite this formidable appearance, there is little evidence of sustained warfare or siege at the site. Could these fortifications have served a primarily ceremonial or social function, designed to impress, intimidate, or unite, rather than to repel invaders? Within the enclosure, Traces of roundhouses and smaller domestic structures suggest the presence of a significant community, possibly several hundred individuals at its peak. Archaeological finds, pottery, tools, and metalwork indicate a society engaged in farming, craft production, and trade. Yet the arrangement of the internal spaces, combined with the monumental scale of the ramparts, hints at more than mere practicality. Were the internal enclosures organized to facilitate social hierarchy, ritual activity, or communal gatherings? Did the builders intend for the layout itself to convey meaning, to symbolize control, cohesion, or cosmological order? Mooghaun Hillfort's location adds further layers of mystery. Perched on the ridge, it dominates the surrounding landscape, providing views across fertile valleys, distant hills, and access routes that may have connected disparate communities. Was the visibility of the hill fort a deliberate statement of power or prestige? Did it function as a beacon, guiding travelers, traders, or pilgrims? Or was its placement motivated by sacred or astronomical considerations, linking the fort to celestial events or seasonal cycles in ways we may never fully understand? The construction techniques also invite speculation. Moving vast quantities of limestone, shaping ramparts with precision, and integrating natural topography would have required knowledge of leverage, load distribution, and communal labor organization. How is this knowledge acquired and transmitted in societies without written records? Could such monumental projects indicate a form of proto-engineering, social specialization, or even a cultural emphasis on endurance and permanence? The answers remain elusive, yet the evidence of skill and planning is undeniable. Intriguingly, Mooghaun is not isolated in its ambition. Other hill forts in Ireland and Britain share certain design elements, yet few match its scale and complexity. This raises questions about cultural transmission, social competition, and the motivations driving such monumental efforts. Were hill forts like Mooghaun primarily practical constructions, or did they function as centers of ritual, governance, and identity, signaling the presence of an advanced social organization capable of mobilizing large labor forces for both defense and display? The landscape around Mooghaun offers additional enigmas. Nearby river valleys suggest access to trade, transport, and agricultural resources, while surrounding ridges and hills may have served as strategic observation points or ritual markers. Archaeological evidence points to intermittent occupation, hinting that the site may have been used seasonally or episodically rather than as a permanent settlement. What rituals, gatherings, or events brought people to the hill fort, and what role did the monumental ramparts play in shaping these experiences? The human experience of Mooghaun is tangible even today. Standing atop the ridge, one can sense the scale of effort, the careful planning, and the enduring presence of the stones themselves. Sunlight casts long shadows across the ramparts, highlighting the curves and angles of the walls, while the wind carries the sound of distant valleys into the enclosures. One can imagine the builders hauling stones, organizing labor, and shaping a monument intended to last generations, a physical expression of community, belief, and human ambition. Like other monumental sites we have explored, from Arbor to Glenroan, from Rakhigarhi to Akyrtas, Mooghaun Hillfort embodies the tension between the practical and the enigmatic. Its stones are measurable, its ramparts tangible, yet its true purpose, social context, and cultural meaning remain largely hidden. Was Mooghaun built primarily for defense, for social cohesion, for ritual, or for some combination of these? Or does its true significance lie in something now irretrievably lost, encoded in its scale, its placement, and the human effort that raised it from earth and stone? Standing on the ridge today, gazing across the valleys and along the curve of the ramparts, one is confronted with both grandeur and mystery. The monument communicates presence without words. intention without instruction. It invites reflection, speculation, and wonder about the societies that built it, their understanding of the landscape, their beliefs, and the knowledge they embedded in stone. And as sunlight shifts and shadows lengthen across the ramparts, one question lingers. Was Mooghaun Hillfort a fortress, a ceremonial center, a symbol of community, or something entirely beyond our modern comprehension? Could it, like so many ancient structures across the world, still hold secrets, rituals, knowledge, or meaning that elude our understanding, waiting silently within the stones to be sensed, imagined, or discovered? Flowing gently from the monumental expanse of Mooghaun Hillfort, where stone ramparts stretch across the landscape and whisper of Bronze Age ambition and organization, we now descend into the quieter, more enigmatic hills of County Meath, Ireland. Here, amid the rolling countryside and the soft contours of ancient drumlins, sits a complex of passage tombs known as the Loughcrew Cairns, a site whose stones seem to hold memory itself. Unlike the exposed ramparts of Mooghaun, Loughcrew is intimate, hidden among hills, yet it exerts a power of presence that draws the eye, inviting contemplation of human intention, ritual, and the passage of time. From the approach, the cairns appear as clusters of stone mounds scattered across the hilltops, modest in form but deliberate in placement. These are not mere heaps of rock. Each mound is the result of careful planning and construction, a deliberate manipulation of the landscape to create both shelter and symbolic resonance. Cairn T, the most famous of the complex, sits atop the ridge, its stones weathered and lichen-clad, yet precise in their arrangement. The mound is approachable by a subtle pathway, itself likely to have been shaped and maintained by those who first used the tombs thousands of years ago. Stepping closer, the intricacy of the construction becomes evident. Within the cairn lies a passage, narrow and low, leading into a stone chamber whose walls are engraved with spirals, lozenges, and meandering lines. These carvings, faint but perceptible even today, speak of human creativity, ritual, and perhaps coded meaning. The alignment of the passage is remarkable. At dawn on the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight travels along the corridor, illuminating the inner chamber and the carvings within. The effect is fleeting, lasting only moments, yet it is precise and deliberate, suggesting sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, light, and the cyclical nature of time. Dating of the Loughcrew Cairns places their construction in the Neolithic period, around 3200 to 2900 BCE. They belong to a broader tradition of passage tombs across Ireland, including the more famous Newgrange and Noath sites. Yet Loughcrew differs in its intimacy and its integration with the surrounding hills. The cairns are lower, more subtle, less monumental in scale, yet no less deliberate. Their placement across multiple hilltops creates a network of sites, each visible from the others, suggesting a broader landscape of ritual, observation, or territorial demarcation. The carvings themselves invite deep reflection. Spirals, concentric circles, and intersecting lines cover the interior stones, executed with careful skill. Scholars debate their meaning. Are they symbolic representations of life, death, or the cosmos? Do they chart the movement of the sun, the stars, or seasonal cycles? Could they encode ritual knowledge or ancestral memory, a visual language now lost to us? The precise intent of the artists is uncertain, yet their work continues to speak across millennia, capturing attention, inspiring awe, and provoking speculation. The tomb's construction demonstrates both technical skill and ritual sensitivity. Huge stones, some weighing several tons, were transported and positioned with precision, forming stable chambers that endure to this day. How did Neolithic communities achieve this without metal tools or wheeled vehicles? Were wooden sledges and levers sufficient? Did large groups work in coordinated effort, guided by ritual, tradition, or leadership? The process suggests more than practical problem-solving. It hints at a culture deeply attuned to communal labor, landscape, and cosmological awareness. The alignment of Cairn T is particularly striking. On the mornings of the equinoxes, sunlight penetrates the narrow passage, striking the backstone of the chamber in a dramatic display. The timing is precise, requiring knowledge of solar patterns and careful positioning of the stones. Yet, why this alignment? Was it intended to mark seasonal transitions, to guide agricultural activity, or to serve as a spiritual event for the living and the dead? Could this fleeting illumination have held symbolic significance, bridging earthly existence with cycles of life, death, and renewal? Other cairns in the Loughcrew complex suggest similar considerations, though each has unique variations. Some chambers are smaller, some passages more intricate, some carvings more abstract. Taken together, they create a landscape that merges architecture, astronomy, and artistry into a cohesive yet enigmatic whole. The hilltops themselves, gently sloping and intervisible, may have been chosen for their prominence, their views, or a sacred geometry now invisible to us. Were these tombs intended to guide travelers, mark territories, or connect communities in ritual practice? Or did they serve a purpose entirely beyond our reconstruction, a ceremonial network of memory and meaning encoded in stone? Excavations have revealed evidence of cremated human remains, small artifacts, and traces of ritual activity, yet much remains hidden. The tombs were used repeatedly over generations, suggesting continuity of tradition and perhaps an enduring social or spiritual significance. The stones themselves, unadorned externally yet inscribed internally, create a dichotomy of visibility and secrecy, public presence and private ritual. Was this intentional, designed to reveal meaning only at specific moments, like the equinox sunrise, or to maintain sacred knowledge accessible only to initiates? The sensory experience of Loughcrew is subtle yet profound. The approach along grassy paths, the sudden emergence of cairns on hilltops, the narrow passage into cool, dimly lit chambers, the faint spirals etched in stone, all evoke a connection across millennia. The wind carries the distant sound of sheep and birds, sunlight shifts across the landscape, and one can imagine the Neolithic observers who first aligned the stones with the heavens, anticipating the moment when light would illuminate their carvings in a silent celebration of cycles beyond human control. Loughcrew, like Mooghaun, Hillfort, and other sites we have explored, embodies the tension between what is tangible and what remains mysterious. It is a site of measurable architecture, technical skill, and visible artistry, yet its deeper meaning, its social context, and the intentions of its builders elude us. Was it primarily a funerary space, a ritual observatory, a calendar, a place of memory, or all of these simultaneously? How much of its significance is encoded in the carvings, the alignments, or the spatial relationships between cairns, and how much is lost to time, waiting silently in stone for modern eyes to interpret? As sunlight filters into Cairn T during the equinox, illuminating the engraved spirals, one feels a bridge between the ancient and the present. It is a fleeting moment of connection, a glimpse into the worldview of those who first shaped the hilltops, moving stone by stone, guided by observation, ritual, and belief. The cairns stand as both monuments and mysteries, silent witnesses to human endeavor, artistry, and spirituality across thousands of years. And as the shadows lengthen across the hilltops and the stones absorb the fading light, the question persists. What secrets remain buried within the cairns of Loughcrew? Are there aspects of the carvings, alignments, or internal spaces yet to be discovered, interpretations yet to be realized? Could these stones, carefully placed and aligned with the heavens, still speak to us across time, offering insights into Neolithic life, cosmology, and ritual that have so far eluded understanding. The mystery endures, inviting contemplation, investigation, and wonder. Flowing from the quiet grandeur of Loughcrew Cairns, where Neolithic ritual, astronomy, and artistry converge upon the hilltops of Ireland, our exploration now moves thousands of kilometers eastward to the arid landscapes of the Rann of Kutch in Gujarat, India. Here, amid a sun-scorched plateau and sparse vegetation, lies Dholavira, a city of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, remarkable not only for its urban sophistication, but for a feature that continues to inspire awe and speculation: the stone reservoirs. Unlike the monumental tombs of Ireland, Dholavira's reservoirs speak of survival, ingenuity, and control over an environment that is at once harsh and fragile. Yet even today, their construction and purpose provoke questions that remain unresolved. Approaching the site, the stone reservoirs are immediately striking. Cut into the bedrock and lined with carefully fitted stone blocks, they appear almost sculptural, geometric forms resting within the uneven terrain. Channels and steps connect the reservoirs, creating a system capable of storing and managing water across seasons, capturing every precious drop from rainfall and runoff. Some reservoirs are vast, rectangular expanses of stone, while others are smaller, more secluded, yet each is meticulously engineered, demonstrating both planning and technical skill. In a landscape defined by scarcity, these reservoirs represent mastery over nature, a blend of observation, construction, and perhaps foresight that continues to challenge modern understanding. Dholavira itself dates to the mature Harappan period, roughly 2600 to 1900 BCE. The city is laid out with astonishing precision. Streets intersect at right angles, public and private spaces are carefully delineated, and the water management system is integrated into the urban plan. The reservoirs form the heart of this system. Stone-lined channels guide water from the seasonal streams into the holding tanks, while smaller channels distribute it to different areas of the city. Steps descend into the reservoirs, hinting at their practical use by the inhabitants, yet the scale and precision suggest something more deliberate, almost ceremonial in its orderliness. The stonework is particularly noteworthy. Blocks of sandstone and limestone were shaped to fit together with remarkable precision, forming walls that resist erosion and withstand the pressures of seasonal rainfall. The largest reservoirs are over 60 meters in length, with walls several meters thick. The effort required to quarry, transport, and assemble these stones is immense, suggesting a coordinated labor force with both technical knowledge and social organization capable of sustaining such an endeavor. How did a society without metal tools or wheeled vehicles accomplish such precise and enduring constructions? Were there specialized engineers, artisans, or administrators overseeing the work? Beyond their technical achievement, the reservoirs raise questions about societal priorities and knowledge. Water is essential, yet the Dholavira system implies more than simple survival. Its designers considered overflow, filtration, and seasonal fluctuations, indicating a deep understanding of hydrology and long-term environmental management. Some reservoirs are tiered, with channels allowing water to flow from one to another in a controlled sequence. Was this purely functional, or did it also hold symbolic meaning, reflecting order, hierarchy, or cosmological principles in stone and water? Could the arrangement of reservoirs, channels, and steps have been designed to harmonize with the city's spatial and ceremonial patterns, encoding knowledge or authority in their very layout? The urban setting adds another layer of mystery. The reservoirs are integrated into a city that is itself exceptional in its planning and scale. Streets and plazas align with the reservoirs, creating a coherence between public life, ritual spaces, and survival infrastructure. Yet, despite the clear sophistication, the purpose of some features remains obscure. Certain smaller reservoirs, for instance, appear detached from the main channels, prompting speculation. Were they for special purposes? Ritual cleansing, elite consumption, or symbolic displays of control over water? Were the reservoirs purely functional, or did their presence also signal the city's technological prowess to neighboring communities, an architectural assertion of mastery over nature? The very location of Dholavira deepens the intrigue. Situated in a semi-arid region, the city depends entirely on collected rainfall and seasonal streams, with no permanent river nearby. The reservoirs, therefore, are not optional. They are central to survival. Yet the precision with which they are built, stone walls carefully interlocked, channels engineered to minimize loss, steps designed for accessibility, suggests a society that viewed water not merely as a resource, but as a medium for order, planning, and perhaps even ritual significance. How did the designers predict rainfall patterns, erosion, and seasonal variation well enough to create a system that remains largely intact today? Could knowledge of hydrology have been combined with cultural or spiritual imperatives, intertwining practical survival with social and ceremonial meaning? Excavations at Dholavira have uncovered remnants of water management alongside residential complexes, marketplaces, and ceremonial structures. The reservoirs are thus part of a larger narrative, one of urban sophistication, resource control, and societal organization rarely seen in contemporaneous civilizations. Yet the lack of textual records leaves many questions unanswered. How were the reservoirs maintained over generations? Who oversaw their construction and upkeep? Were they symbols of civic authority, spiritual control, or merely advanced engineering? Even today, interpretations vary, with archaeologists emphasizing practical use while some speculate on ritual or symbolic significance, leaving the mystery unresolved. The sensory experience of the site reinforces its enigmatic character. Standing beside one of the largest stone reservoirs, the sun glints off water still held after centuries, reflecting geometric stone lines and angular steps. Wind sweeps across the flat plains, carrying dust and echoes of a long-vanished population. One can almost imagine the activity around the reservoirs: citizens drawing water, workers repairing stone walls, overseers managing flow, rituals perhaps marking seasonal transitions. And yet, despite this sense of life, the reservoirs remain silent, their original purpose partially hidden beneath layers of time, their full meaning a secret preserved in stone. The precision, scale, and durability of the Dholavira reservoirs evoke broader questions about the Indus Valley civilization as a whole. Urban centers like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa reveal sophisticated planning, yet Dholavira's water system seems unmatched in its adaptation to an arid environment. Did its creators possess advanced technical knowledge, passed through generations without written instruction? Could their understanding of hydraulics, stone construction, and urban integration have surpassed what we assume for Bronze Age societies? And if so, why did such knowledge fade after the decline of the Indus cities, leaving later generations to rediscover or reinvent similar technologies? The reservoirs also inspire wonder because of their integration into the natural and social landscape. Their placement takes advantage of natural slopes and seasonal flows, yet every stone seems intentionally positioned. The channels and steps are elegant in their simplicity, yet highly functional. In some ways, the reservoirs are less about monumental display and more about harmony between human need, engineering, and environment. An enduring reminder that ancient societies often blended practicality with aesthetic and perhaps spiritual sensibility. And yet, for all their apparent clarity of purpose, the reservoirs leave us with questions that may never be fully answered. Were they merely a sophisticated method of storing water, or did they hold deeper cultural, social, or spiritual significance? Were the steps and channels purely utilitarian, or designed to create experience, ritual, or symbolic interaction? Could there have been knowledge embedded in the layout itself, understood by the builders but lost to time. As the sun sets over the plateau of Dholavira, casting long shadows across the stone reservoirs, one senses both achievement and mystery. These constructions, precise and enduring, are tangible evidence of human ingenuity, yet their full story remains elusive. Their stones speak of labor, observation, and survival, yet they remain silent on the intentions, beliefs, and knowledge of those who raised them. And so, as the last light fades and the air cools over the arid landscape, one is left with a profound question. What else might these reservoirs and the city around them hold within their carefully measured stones? Could there be methods, knowledge, or meanings encoded in their geometry and placement that remain hidden, awaiting discovery? The mystery endures, challenging our understanding of ancient technology, urban planning, and human ingenuity, inviting contemplation, exploration, and awe. Flowing from the ingenuity and practical mastery of Dholavira's stone reservoirs, which reveal the Indus Valley civilization's profound understanding of water, urban planning, and human survival, our journey now turns to the elevated plains of North Macedonia. Here, atop a rugged hill that overlooks sweeping valleys and the distant contours of mountains, lies Kokino, a site whose purpose and precision continue to captivate both archaeologists and amateur explorers alike. Unlike reservoirs designed to harness the material, Kokino speaks of humanity's fascination with the immaterial, the sky, the stars, the movement of celestial bodies across time. It is here that we encounter one of the oldest known observatories in the world, a testament to early astronomy, yet shrouded in questions that linger even today. The first impression upon approaching Kokino is its dramatic setting. Jagged rocks, worn smooth in some places by centuries of wind and rain, rise from a plateau that commands sweeping views in every direction. The ground is uneven, sculpted by natural forces, yet there is unmistakable evidence of deliberate human intervention. Carved surfaces, cup marks, and alignment stones seem placed with intent, suggesting a purpose beyond shelter or defense. From certain vantage points, the stones frame specific horizons, their positions potentially marking the rising or setting points of the sun during solstices and equinoxes, or the movements of the moon and certain stars. The sense of connection to the cosmos is immediate and visceral. The landscape itself becomes a canvas upon which celestial rhythms might be read. Kokino dates to approximately 1800 BCE, placing it firmly within the Bronze Age, though evidence of earlier activity at the site suggests a longer continuum of use. Scholars have identified carved platforms, raised areas, and stone markers that collectively form what appears to be a sophisticated observational system. Some stones are arranged to create sightlines over distant hills, while others are depressions or grooves in rock surfaces, which may have functioned as calendars, gnomons, or markers for astronomical phenomena. Unlike the monumental constructions of Rathgall or the reservoirs of Dholavira, Kokino's significance lies not in mass or scale, but in its precise engagement with natural cycles and the sky above. One of the most remarkable features of Kokino is the way it integrates observation with experience. The platforms are raised, yet irregular, requiring careful movement from one point to another. Could this movement have been ritualized, part of a ceremonial process of marking time or observing celestial events? Were these platforms purely practical, allowing observers to sight specific alignments, or did the act of moving among them serve a symbolic function, reinforcing social or spiritual hierarchies? Perhaps the builders intended a fusion of the practical and the ceremonial, where the observation of stars was inseparable from cultural meaning. The sophistication of the alignments invites further intrigue. Some stones appear to correspond to sunrise on the winter solstice, while others align with lunar phenomena occurring over multi-year cycles. Such observations require careful measurement, repeated observation, and an understanding of astronomical patterns over time. How did a Bronze Age society achieve such precision? Could this knowledge have been transmitted orally, through generations, or embedded in ritual practices? And if so, what was the broader significance of this knowledge? Was it used to coordinate agricultural activities, to regulate ceremonial calendars, or to assert social and spiritual authority? Archaeological findings at Kokino are sparse but suggestive. While no written records exist, the carved stones themselves, combined with pottery shards and other artifacts found nearby, indicate a site of repeated visitation. The careful placement of markers, some of which are subtly elevated or angled, shows intent, yet the reasoning behind specific arrangements remains elusive. Why these particular stones in these positions? Did the builders follow a sophisticated system of measurement, or were the alignments discovered empirically through observation and trial over generations? And what knowledge might have been lost when the site fell out of use, leaving only these enigmatic markers as testimony? The natural topography enhances the site's mystery. The hill on which Kokino sits is uneven and rugged, yet certain flat areas have been deliberately prepared, smoothed, and leveled. In some places, grooves and cup marks appear to interact with sunlight at specific times of year, creating shadows or reflections that may have functioned as indicators or symbols. The interaction of stone, shadow, and light suggests not merely practical calculation, but an awareness of perception and experience. Could these features have been designed to produce awe, to guide ritual observation, or even to encode knowledge in ways that are now obscured? Beyond practical and ceremonial considerations, Kokino invites speculation on social organization. A site of this sophistication implies leadership, coordination, and a culture that valued observation and knowledge of the heavens. Did the society that built Kokino have specialists, astronomers, priests, or ritual leaders charged with interpreting celestial signs? Were these observations accessible to the entire community, or reserved for an elite few? The precision and placement of the stones hint at specialized knowledge, yet the broader cultural context remains largely invisible to us, hidden in the rhythms of a society long vanished. Kokino's legacy is not only in its physical stones, but in the questions it provokes. It demonstrates that Bronze Age societies could engage deeply with the cosmos, developing knowledge systems that integrated observation, measurement, and social meaning. Yet the site's full purpose is uncertain. Was Kokino primarily a calendar, a ceremonial platform, a sacred landscape, or a combination of all three? Some have suggested the possibility of symbolic astronomy, where alignments were less about practical timekeeping and more about embedding cultural narratives into the landscape itself. Could the motions of the sun and moon have been interpreted as divine signals, encoded into ritual practice, or used to synchronize communal life with natural cycles? Walking the site today, one is struck by the way light and shadow animate the stones. As the sun moves across the sky, it casts elongated shadows into carved depressions, highlighting the careful geometry and subtle alignments. The wind sweeps across the plateau, carrying distant sounds that seem to echo across time. One can imagine observers from millennia ago moving carefully from platform to platform, tracing the horizon, marking the solstice, or performing rituals to honor celestial cycles. And yet, despite this vivid sense of life, Kokino remains silent, leaving its story half told, its intentions partially obscured. In considering Kokino alongside other ancient structures, Rakhigarhi's platforms, Dholavira's reservoirs, Rathgall's ramparts, the theme of human ingenuity and engagement with environment emerges repeatedly. Yet Kokino is unique in its focus on the immaterial, the movement of celestial bodies, and the interface of perception, experience, and measurement. It challenges modern observers to consider not only technical skill, but also the philosophical and cultural frameworks that guided its construction. How did these people conceptualize time, space, and the heavens? What knowledge did they possess that allowed them to encode celestial patterns into stone, visible yet mysterious to all who followed? And so, as the sun dips toward the western horizon, illuminating the rugged stones of Kokino in golden light, we are left with the enduring question: what knowledge, experience, or ritual has been encoded in these carefully carved stones that remains hidden to us today? Could there be meanings, methods, or insights yet undiscovered, preserved in alignment and geometry, waiting for future generations to perceive and interpret? The mystery endures, a silent testament to the enduring human fascination with the heavens, inviting us to look upward, wonder, and question what our ancestors saw in the skies above. Flowing from the elevated precision and celestial purpose of Kokino, we now turn our attention to a landscape shaped not by horizons or sunrises, but by stone and memory, where time seems to have crystallized into massive slabs that have endured for millennia. In the rolling hills of Pembrokeshire, Wales, near windswept fields and mist-laden valleys, stands Pentre Ifan, a chambered tomb whose silhouette against the sky captures both grandeur and quiet mystery. Unlike the observational platforms of Kokino, Pentre Ifan is grounded, monumental, and intimate all at once, a human-made sanctuary carved from stone, yet seemingly in dialogue with the heavens. The first impression is arresting. The tomb's most striking feature is its enormous capstone, a single slab of local dolerite weighing approximately 16 tons, delicately balanced atop slender supporting stones to create a chamber beneath. From a distance, it appears almost impossibly suspended, as if the forces of nature themselves conspired to lift it into place. The supporting orthostats, arranged with deliberate care, form a narrow chamber beneath the massive roof, a space that could have accommodated perhaps a handful of people standing side by side. The geometry is both simple and precise, emphasizing function while evoking awe. How was such a weight moved and positioned with Bronze Age technology? What guided the builder's hands, ensuring balance and durability across thousands of years? Pentre Ifan dates to roughly 3,500 BCE, during the Neolithic period, a time when societies were transitioning from nomadic lifestyles to more settled agrarian communities. Chambered tombs, such as this one, are often considered communal burial sites, yet the evidence within Pentre Ifan itself is sparse. Excavations reveal limited human remains, leading some archaeologists to suggest that the tomb may have served ceremonial purposes beyond interment. Could it have been a site for ancestor worship, seasonal ritual, or even an astronomical observatory of sorts? The alignment and placement of the tomb on a gentle rise overlooking surrounding valleys suggest a careful consideration of sightlines and landscape, hinting at meanings lost to time. The setting of Pentre Ifan amplifies its mystery. From the tomb, one can survey the surrounding hills, valleys, and distant waterways, as though the builders intended for the site to command perspective, both literally and symbolically. The capstone, flat yet imposing, catches the shifting light of the day, reflecting subtle hues at dawn and dusk. The shadows of the supporting stones stretch and contract across the chamber floor, marking time in ways that are at once observable and enigmatic. Did the builders intend for these effects to carry meaning, to mark seasonal changes, sacred moments, or the passage of life itself? Or were these subtle interactions of stone, light, and shadow merely incidental, a byproduct of the capstone's placement? What is particularly compelling about Pentre Ifan is the balance of scale and detail. The tomb is massive, yet intimate. The capstone asserts dominance, but the chamber beneath is human in scale, inviting exploration and proximity. This duality raises questions about the experience of the site. How did individuals or groups interact with it? Was it approached solemnly, collectively, in ritual? Was it a space of silent contemplation, or a stage for communal ceremonies designed to connect the living with the dead? The tomb's enduring presence suggests that whatever its original purpose, it commanded attention and care for generations. Evidence from Pentre Ifan and other similar tombs across Wales suggests that these structures were part of a broader landscape of ritual and settlement. The Neolithic peoples of this region appear to have organized their communities with a keen awareness of the natural environment, choosing locations that offered visibility, prominence, and perhaps even acoustic or energetic qualities. The tomb's position atop a rise overlooking fertile valleys may have held practical significance as a territorial marker, yet its monumental architecture and meticulous construction speak to a symbolic or spiritual intent that transcends the practical. Despite centuries of study, much about Pentre Ifan remains enigmatic. How was the capstone transported? Some theories propose rolling logs, earthen ramps, or human pulley systems, yet no definitive evidence exists. Could there have been specialized knowledge, engineering, ritual, or even astronomical that guided its construction? And what of the chamber beneath? Why is evidence of human remains so scarce? Was the tomb ever fully used as a burial site, or did its primary function lie elsewhere, in ceremony, observation, or commemoration? Speculative interpretations abound. Some have suggested that the tomb's long axis aligns with particular points on the horizon, possibly marking solstices or other celestial events. Could the interplay of shadow and stone have been used to track time, lunar cycles, or agricultural seasons? Others propose that the site's prominence was intended to project power or authority, a marker of social cohesion or identity. There are even whispers, at the edges of academic discourse, of subtle acoustical effects produced within the chamber, how sound resonates beneath the capstone, and whether these effects were harnessed for ritual purposes, to amplify chant, or to create an auditory threshold between worlds. While evidence remains circumstantial, the possibilities invite contemplation. The surrounding landscape, too, contributes to Pentre Ifan's enduring mystery. Other Neolithic sites dot the hills and valleys nearby, forming a network of monuments that may have been connected through ritual, social, or symbolic systems. Could Pentre Ifan have functioned as a focal point within a larger sacred geography? And if so, what messages were encoded in the relationship between site and site, in the movement across valleys and along ridges, in the sequence of light and shadow across stone? Walking among the standing stones and beneath the capstone today, one is struck by a sense of continuity with the past. The tomb invites touch, exploration, and reflection, yet it remains stubbornly distant in its meaning. Modern visitors can feel the weight of the stone, the deliberate placement of each supporting rock, and the meticulous care taken to secure stability over millennia, but the intentions of its builders remain partially hidden, encoded in the landscape, the angles of stone, and the ephemeral play of sunlight and shadow. In this way, Pentre Ifan resonates with other ancient structures we have explored: the precision of Kokino, the hydraulic genius of Dholavira, the elevated stone platforms of Rakhigarhi. Across time and geography, humanity has sought to manipulate material, space, and perception, whether to mark the passage of seasons, honor the dead, assert social identity, or engage with the cosmos. Yet Pentre Ifan is unique in its fusion of simplicity and majesty, its balance of monumentality and intimacy, its silent testimony to ingenuity and ritual. As the sun dips toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the Pembrokeshire hills, the capstone of Pentre Ifan glows faintly in the fading light. Wind brushes across the plateau, carrying whispers of ancient voices long silent, yet somehow still present in the geometry and weight of stone. The tomb continues to hold us in tension between the visible and the unknown, offering a space to wonder, to imagine, and to reflect on questions that have endured for more than 5 millennia. Why was it built? How was it constructed with such care and precision? And what knowledge or intent remains hidden beneath that monumental capstone? The mystery lingers, inviting contemplation and study, yet resisting final answers. Pentre Ifan remains a sentinel of memory, a bridge between human endeavor and the immaterial, a place where the past continues to speak softly to the present, leaving us to ask what secrets remain etched in stone, awaiting those willing to observe, question, and imagine. Flowing from the monumental balance of Pentre Ifan, where stone, light, and landscape converge to create a silent dialogue across millennia, our journey now moves southward across the Adriatic, into the rugged hills of Albania. Here, perched amid steep terraces and overlooking verdant valleys, lies the Selka stone settlement, a site whose weathered walls and fragmented foundations whisper of a past both tangible and elusive. Unlike the isolated chamber tombs of Wales, Selka represents a broader, lived-in environment, a community built of stone, shaped by its terrain, and yet leaving questions as enduring as the rock itself. The first sight is arresting. From the lower valleys, the remnants of Selka emerge as a series of pale gray stones jutting from the hillside, forming outlines of dwellings, courtyards, and defensive enclosures. The settlement's layout follows the contours of the land with remarkable fidelity. Terraces carved into the slope to create level spaces, walls built with precision to hold soil, and foundations so carefully aligned that some modern architects marvel at their enduring stability. Even in ruin, the stones convey intention, each block placed deliberately, each wall constructed with care. One cannot help but wonder, how did these ancient builders adapt to the challenges of this unforgiving terrain, balancing practicality, safety, and perhaps symbolic meaning in every stone? Archaeologists date Selka to the late Bronze Age, with continuous occupation extending into the early Iron Age. Pottery shards, metal tools, and scattered remnants of hearths suggest daily life once flourished here. Families prepared food in modest stone hearths, worked clay and metal, and stored grain in small, recessed compartments carved into the terraces. Yet despite these indicators of domesticity, Selka does not resemble a conventional settlement of its period. Its structures are unusually robust, the walls thicker and more carefully engineered than many contemporaneous sites. Could this reflect a heightened concern for defense, a social hierarchy demanding monumental structures, or some ritual or symbolic imperative now lost to time? The spatial organization of Selka is particularly enigmatic. Some terraces and foundations appear to have been designed for communal use, while others are isolated, almost hidden from the main thoroughfare. Certain walls are aligned with striking precision along north-south or east-west axes, prompting questions about potential astronomical, calendrical, or religious significance. Were these alignments coincidental, a reflection of the terrain, or the result of deliberate planning by people who observed celestial events as part of their daily and ritual life? Evidence of defensive features adds another layer of mystery. Stone ramparts and retaining walls suggest a need for fortification, yet the settlement's remote location may have already provided natural protection. Why then invest so heavily in constructing these barriers? Were they built in response to repeated threats, or did they serve a symbolic function, demarcating sacred or socially significant zones within the community? In many ways, Selka straddles the line between settlement and ceremonial complex, a place where practical life and ritual may have coexisted seamlessly. The artifacts found at Selka further complicate interpretation. Bronze tools, fragments of jewelry, and occasional figurines point to a skilled and resourceful community engaged in craft, trade, and artistic expression. Yet the absence of large burial sites or extensive religious structures leaves questions about social organization and belief systems unanswered. Were the dead interred elsewhere, in locations now lost to erosion or time, or did Selka's inhabitants practice forms of ritual or commemoration that left minimal trace? The possibility that Selka functioned both as a residential hub and a ceremonial center cannot be discounted. Some researchers have speculated that the settlement may have been part of a network of highland communities, linked by trade routes and seasonal migrations, yet its architecture hints at local innovation rather than imitation. The builders exploited local stone, adapting construction techniques to the slope, climate, and available materials in ways that suggest an intimate understanding of the environment. The resulting structures are resilient, harmoniously integrated into the hillside, and surprisingly enduring, defying erosion and centuries of neglect. Beyond the practical and the ceremonial, Selka evokes a sense of the intangible. The terraces, the winding pathways, and the interplay of walls and open spaces hint at an aesthetic sensibility. Was the arrangement of stones merely functional, or did it convey a visual or symbolic narrative, legible to those who lived here but obscured to modern eyes? Some have suggested that the settlement's orientation, with certain terraces catching morning light and others aligned with distant mountain peaks, may reflect cosmological or spiritual concerns, a dialogue between human habitation and the larger natural world. Walking among the ruins today, one is struck by the silence, broken only by wind through the terraced stones. The sheer effort required to quarry, transport, and position these blocks speaks to organization, communal labor, and knowledge that remains partially inaccessible to us. How did the people of Selka coordinate such projects without written records? Did ritual, leadership, or shared belief guide their hands as much as necessity? And if the settlement was abandoned or gradually fell into ruin, what factors, environmental change, conflict, disease, or social transformation, contributed to its disappearance? Selka, like many ancient sites we have encountered, from the observatories of Kokino to the chambered tombs of Pentre Ifon, invites questions rather than answers. Its stones bear witness to a human presence that was at once practical, artistic, and possibly spiritual. Its terraces and walls speak to ingenuity, resilience, and adaptation, yet the absence of clear explanatory markers leaves a void in our understanding. We can speculate, we can model, and we can compare, but the full story remains tantalizingly out of reach. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Selka lies not in any single artifact or structure, but in the sum of its design, location, and endurance. It embodies a people who engaged deeply with their environment, transforming steep hillsides into spaces that accommodated life, labor, and possibly ritual. It challenges assumptions about social complexity in the late Bronze and early Iron Age Balkans, forcing us to reconsider how knowledge, culture, and construction intersected in communities that left no written record. As sunlight fades over the Albanian hills, casting long shadows across terraces and walls, Selka stands in quiet testimony to the ingenuity of its builders. Each stone seems to hold a memory of human hands, of ideas, of effort, of lives now long gone. And yet the site remains unresolved, a puzzle of alignment, purpose, and meaning. How were these terraces planned? What daily rituals or communal activities filled the spaces between walls? And above all, what can Selka teach us about the people who lived here, their knowledge, their beliefs, and their relationship to the landscape? The settlement endures, silent yet speaking through its stones, inviting us to imagine, question, and reflect. It is a place where the line between the known and the unknown is deliberately blurred, a space that challenges modern understanding while offering a tangible connection to a distant past. Selka remains a mystery, not because it is hidden or inaccessible, but because it asks us to consider the human capacity for ingenuity, adaptation, and subtle expression in ways that we are only beginning to understand. And as we look across its terraces, tracing the contours of walls and pathways shaped by hands long gone, we are left to wonder how much of its story remains etched in stone, and how much is forever lost to time, waiting for those willing to observe, question, and imagine the lives of those who called Selka home. Flowing southward from the terraced ingenuity of Selka, our journey now takes us deep into Central Asia, to the rugged foothills of western Tajikistan, where the distant peaks of the Zarafshan Range cast long shadows over a landscape that seems both harsh and inviting. Amid these stony slopes and sun-baked plains lies the Sarazm Stone Settlement, an extraordinary site whose foundations hint at one of the earliest known urban experiments in the region. Here, stone, earth, and human ambition converge in ways that are at once practical, monumental, and enigmatic. At first glance, Sarazm's ruins are deceptively simple. Low stone walls rise from the soil, outlining rectangular and circular structures, courtyards, and storage areas. Pathways weave through clusters of dwellings, their patterns suggesting planning and communal organization. Unlike the sharply terraced Albanian settlements, Sarazm spreads across a relatively flat expanse. Yet even here, human ingenuity imposed order on nature. Walls follow subtle rises in terrain, and platforms are leveled with care, creating durable foundations that have withstood millennia of erosion and seismic activity. The stones themselves are roughly hewn, yet carefully fitted, forming structures that are simultaneously resilient and understated. One cannot help but pause and ask, how did the builders of Sarazm envision their community, and what principles guided the arrangement of homes, courtyards, and public spaces? Sarazm is one of Central Asia's earliest proto-urban sites, flourishing around 3,200 to 2,500 BCE. Excavations have revealed an array of artifacts: pottery, tools, figurines, and traces of early metallurgy. Copper and bronze objects, along with evidence of workshops, indicate not just subsistence living but complex craft production. The settlement's residents engaged in agriculture, livestock rearing, and trade, linking Sarazm to distant regions, including the Iranian Plateau and the steppes of Kazakhstan. Such connectivity suggests a level of social and economic sophistication previously unimagined for communities of this period. Yet even as these findings illuminate daily life, they open new questions about the settlement's scale, purpose, and social organization. The layout of Sarazm is particularly intriguing. Dwellings cluster in what appear to be neighborhoods, yet certain enclosures stand apart, larger, more robust, or more carefully constructed. Were these the homes of leaders, communal centers, or sites for ritual activity? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete. Unlike many contemporary settlements, Sarazm lacks monumental temples or palaces, yet its architecture implies hierarchy and organization. The boundaries between domestic, industrial, and ceremonial spaces remain blurred, suggesting a worldview where the functional and symbolic were closely intertwined. One of the settlement's most fascinating features is its integration with natural resources. Irrigation channels, terraced fields, and strategically placed storage pits indicate an advanced understanding of water management and agriculture in a challenging environment. Yet the sophistication of these solutions raises further questions. How was knowledge transmitted across generations without written language? Did Sarazm's planners draw upon inherited techniques, observation of the landscape, or knowledge exchanged through long-distance trade networks? And if so, what does this tell us about the intellectual and cultural life of its inhabitants? Artifacts recovered from Sarazm add another layer of mystery. Pottery often bears incised geometric patterns, and some clay figurines depict human and animal forms that are stylized, symbolic, or even abstract. Metallurgical residues suggest experimentation and mastery over bronze and copper, yet there is no direct record explaining the rationale behind certain designs, alignments, or production methods. Were some objects utilitarian, others ceremonial, and yet others a fusion of both? Could the layout of the settlement itself, with its stone foundations and carefully oriented structures, hold symbolic meaning that we are only beginning to glimpse? Trade evidence at Sarazm is equally compelling. Materials such as lapis lazuli, seashells, and obsidian, all originating from distant regions, have been unearthed within the settlement. Such items imply connections spanning hundreds, perhaps even thousands of kilometers, linking Sarazm to networks of exchange that stretched across Central and South Asia. How were these networks organized, and what social or economic structures enabled such long-distance contact? The answers remain elusive, yet they point to a community operating on a scale and sophistication that defies simple categorization as a village. Sarazm also challenges assumptions about the emergence of early urban life. While cities are often associated with monumental architecture or centralized authority, Sarazm suggests that complex, organized settlements could arise in ways that are subtle, integrated with the environment, and yet durable across millennia. The stones, platforms, and pathways speak not of grandeur, but of resilience, of coordinated effort, and of an understanding of space that is both practical and perhaps symbolic. Could this reflect a worldview where human habitation itself was a form of order imposed upon a wild, challenging landscape? And if so, what rituals, customs, or beliefs guided the careful placement of walls and terraces? Walking through the site today, the experience is both grounding and disorienting. Stones worn smooth by time, and the elements rise in patterns that are immediately legible yet strangely alien. Paths wind between foundations, hinting at movement, conversation, and labor long vanished. There is no inscription to tell us the names of the people who built Sarazm, nor a tomb to reveal their rituals of death. And yet the arrangement of space, the remains of workshops, and the careful leveling of terraces speak with a quiet authority. The settlement communicates, but in a language that must be felt, imagined, and slowly interpreted. Speculative interpretations have emerged over the decades. Some researchers have suggested that Sarazm functioned as a proto-urban hub, a center for trade and craft production in the broader region. Others propose that certain enclosures or alignments may have had ritual or astronomical significance, perhaps marking solstices or equinoxes. While tantalizing, these ideas remain conjectural, for Sarazm offers few definitive answers. Its mysteries lie not only in what we uncover, but in what seems deliberately hidden, whether by the erosion of time or by design. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Sarazm is its endurance. Millennia of wind, rain, and human neglect have failed to erase the outlines of the settlement. Each stone, each foundation, each carefully planned terrace is a testimony to human ambition, ingenuity, and resilience. And yet, the story of its people, their social structures, their beliefs, their daily lives, remains largely obscured, inviting reflection and imagination. As the sun dips behind the Zarafshan peaks, casting shadows across low walls and terraces, Sarazm holds its secrets silently, its stone platforms and foundations standing as a dialogue between past and present. How did these early builders perceive their world? How did they coordinate labor, organize trade, and structure their lives in ways that left enduring traces without leaving written records? And above all, what remains buried beneath the soil, waiting for future discovery, perhaps revealing facets of human knowledge, culture, or ritual that we have not yet conceived? Sarazm, like Selka and many other settlements we have encountered, challenges our understanding of human history. It reminds us that the capacity for organization, adaptation, and expression existed long before cities, writing, or monumental architecture. Its stones endure, speaking through silence, inviting us to question, imagine, and reflect. And as we trace the contours of terraces, foundations, and pathways, one question lingers above all. How much of human ingenuity, ritual, and daily life is still hidden beneath the surface, waiting for those willing to look closely, think deeply, and wonder at the lives of the people who shaped this remarkable settlement?